Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov, and we are here today to talk about the Donald Trump tariffs, whether this trade war means an end to our civilization as we know it, or whether it's some 7D backgammon being played to bring America back as the titan on the world stage of innovation and industry and all of that, or maybe it's something in between. And with us here, we have Joshua Rayner, who is an incredibly inspiring, how do I say this, vitalist. I guess vitalist would be the right term. How would you describe yourself?
Let's go with that.
All right, let's go with that. We have Armand Domalewski back with us, YIMBY activist who is one of the smartest people I know, and one of the people who I am really thankful for bringing on BTR all the time, despite there being certain clashes as far as you being more on the Democrat side. So thank you very much, Armand. You're the best. And we have Erik Finman, the Bitcoin soon-to-be probably billionaire or trillionaire, who knows what's going to be going on. Big fan of the Iranian Shah. Hopefully,
free Iran, free
right.
Iran. That's been the. Anyways, I have a whole story there, but that's different.
We'll go into it a little bit later. And lastly, before we begin, guys, I want to update everybody with a Lev news item, which is related to what we're going to be talking here as well. Congress passed the TikTok ban in an overwhelming and bipartisan fashion, and the Supreme Court upheld it. And yet, President Trump is defying it, not once, but twice. He's issued back-to-back 75-day extensions and handed TikTok a lifeline. The law allows for one extension, and only if there's a serious deal on the table. And now Trump has gone beyond all that, and he's doing it without any authority. As we know, TikTok is a powerful influence tool of the Chinese government. Its parent company, ByteDance, is controlled by Beijing, and it cannot be sold without the CCP's permission. But instead of shutting it down like the law demands, Trump is keeping it online, while saying progress is being made, tying it to his broader China negotiations. And it raises the question, how much has Trump been influenced by ByteDance's army of lobbyists? How many voices around him are being paid to protect China's grip on this app? And why is he listening to them? In my view, this is not putting America first. This is letting a foreign adversary shape the minds of millions. So before we get to the tariffs, any thoughts on that? And once again, everybody, smash that subscribe button, smash the like button, and share this to all your friends. Anyway, guys, who wants to take this TikTok question before we get into the main subject?
I can say that I think, 100% agree with you. TikTok should be sold. My understanding is what happened is that there was a deal that the CCP was going to sign off on because they legally have to allow any sale to happen for it to happen. But then, like Trump's tariffs announcements, like nuke the deal. The issue is that the reason Trump's getting away with it is the way that the law is written. It's unclear who has standing to sue. So I think it's most likely like only Congress could sue. And they don't, want to go against Trump, so it's a weird dynamic.
Let's see, Erik, what are your thoughts on this?
So my thoughts on it is I think you're absolutely right. People have been getting paid to flip their viewpoints on the TikTok ban. Unless TikTok can be used for the based American empire, it should be banned and shut down. But if it can be sold to, real American patriots to, .tm, then .melgibson.jpg, then it should be banned. But if it can be sold to Mark Andreessen, to Oracle, Larry Ellison, then I think it's absolutely worth keeping around if it can be signed or at least majority owned by the Americans. I would accept some compromise with majority owned by real American patriots.jpg.
Joshua, please disagree with us for the sake of the stream.
I've never really paid much attention to TikTok. I've never really used it.
Listen out. It's a good app.
Yeah, I'm sure, I remember years ago, Gary V's like, doesn't matter if you like TikTok, everyone's on TikTok, so you got to be on TikTok. But my mom's a big Fox News person, and they have commercials all the time with people saying, "Oh, I put my small business on TikTok and I made like $25,000 the next day." So they're pushing that angle pretty strong on Fox. So yeah, I mean, I haven't really paid too much attention to it besides evil China, that whole thing. But it definitely seems like there's obviously money coming in to get people to just let it lay the way it is and let China keep taking control over that.
So with all the money coming in right now, possibly creating a scenario where MAGA is not necessarily working as much for the sake of the American people, do you, Joshua, think that these tariffs, regardless of all this stuff about TikTok, are going to balance that out and are going to work on behalf of the American people in order to make America prosperous? What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a plan truster when it comes to Trump, and it seems like he's always a step or two ahead of the rest of the world, and so he kind of leaps forward with these potentially outlandish acts and watches everyone sort of adjust their behavior, and then things kind of fall in line and work out. So genius or insanity, I'd say, is more of an insane genius.
All right, and I know that, Erik, you're somewhere in the middle between Armand and Joshua. Armand, I think you're totally against these tariffs, and you have the floor right now, buddy. Just unmute yourself. I temporarily muted you while you were doing the chair thing, so go for it.
Oh, I thought you were going to go Erik first, but
No, I want to go to
me
you
too.
first.
That's what I thought you were going.
Erik is the balancing agent. I just want to set the tone right now that you are on the side of being completely against the tariffs. So I want to see if Erik will be able to salvage your two disagreements here. So anyway,
Okay.
Go for it, Armand.
Well, here's the thing. Like, what is the plan, right? Because from the Trump administration, we've been hearing like Lutnick and Bessent and like Elon speaking, right? And Elon's vision is like, oh, we're just doing this tough trade negotiation to actually get to free trade and cut all these free trade deals. And then Lutnick came out and was like, no, even though Vietnam lowered its tariffs, we're keeping the tariffs because they're ripping us off. And so we're not doing that. Bessent's saying it's like some sort of play to reduce like treasury bond rates. And then like Lutnick has also said that actually the goal is to bring back more manufacturing, but that doesn't explain like why they're tariffing like bananas or a island of penguins. So like part of the reason that this sort of a policy is not even if you believed in tariffs, the way that it is being done, the messaging that is communicated is so chaotic that like manufacturers are not going to be, you're hearing reports all the time right now of like manufacturing companies saying like, we don't know what's going to happen. So like we're shutting down any sort of plans for investment, for creating new factories, for expansion, because of the uncertainty, right? Because even if you really believed in tariffs, if you thought that a week from now Trump might reverse it, you're going to set up a factory for it. And also like other countries are retaliating. So, before you even can trust the plan, like, I don't know what the plan is. Does anybody?
Erik, what do you think?
I agree on a communications front. They should, even if it's not the whole picture, they should just say purpose of tariffs is to bring American manufacturing back here to the U.S. Even again, if it's to T-bonds this and that, just should be to bring back manufacturing to the U.S. And I think Vietnam is a particular unique scenario just because it is so easy just to there is actually a certain amount of manufacturing there. It's an easy way for China to just launder through Vietnam to get to the U.S. if they did it. Like Vietnam is a different I was actually hoping that they wouldn't take I feel like the bait on Vietnam, I guess getting rid of all tariffs on the U.S., lowering all tariffs on the U.S., because it's such a different, the imports into Vietnam versus the exports and the potential exports from Vietnam to the U.S. is just a league of difference and always will be because of population and land size. So I'm glad that they didn't take the bait on that. I think that my view of it is choose your battle. So I'm against these tariffs. But I think you got to choose your battle. And I have a different priority of what my battle would be if I were in their position. There's the trade imbalances with particularly actually with Europe, that Trump's talked a lot about, a lot of other Western countries, trade imbalances that I think absolutely should be rectified. So it's a priority. my view, it would be, what are you going to prioritize? Are you going to prioritize rectifying trade imbalances with allies, or are you going to maybe be okay with a little bit of those trade imbalances, but use that leverage, and maybe still fix some of those trade imbalances, but use that leverage to go after more, the other great powers, although never as great as the U.S. in the world. I would rather say, we're going to be nice to you on tariffs. Maybe we can negotiate something better, but I want you to tariff China way more. I want you to, I would have liked to see larger tariffs on China, but if they did larger tariffs on China than they already have done, plus tariff the world and tariff other Western countries, then you would actually have a global financial crisis. I want Europe to increase their tariffs on China. I want the U.S. to go even more. I want to tariff China and, to an extent, Russia, and even a lot of, some parts of the global South as well. And that would just be my priorities, because I want to live in a unipolar world where the U.S. is the only game in town, because I think the U.S. is the best country in the world, not to sound cheesy. And I think that the world is run off of the alliance between the U.S. and Europe and a lot of these Western countries. And I want to keep focused on keeping it that way, rather than doing maybe some necessary infighting. But I would do that necessary infighting or necessary fixing those trade imbalances in the large way that they're doing now, after China has kind of been sidelined in the race for, being potentially running the world in many ways, and them being a unipolar world order.
Before I get to Joshua, speaking of cheesy, even though I give the devil his due with some of the Wisconsin cheeses, France makes the best cheeses. And I don't really like this idea that the history of all of this innovation in these European countries is going to be tariffed for the sake of, some maybe well-intended people in America trying their best making a nice cheese, where, you know what I mean? Like, in reality, it would be nice for the best quality things to be available from the countries that actually know how to do it the best, as far as, French cheese, or if we're talking like Japan with its cars. Because with automotives as well, there was a time during the late 60s, 70s, 80s, where the automotive industry wasn't really having a lot of competition, and a lot of the cars that were coming out of the United States started to decline in quality. So I don't really want something like that to happen either. But regardless, Joshua, do you agree with Erik's thought that maybe we shouldn't really bully Europe right now, maybe wait till later after we take care of China? Do you see this as being a bad strategy on the part of Trump?
Well, I think Erik has a good point. The only thing that, we've seen this both from Trump and Vance, is that it's kind of like this process is a reassertion of our dominance, right? So, Vance had his whole thing when the Signal chat leaked, that it's just like, I'm tired of like cleaning up Europe's mess kind of a thing. And so a lot of this, the posturing is just kind of reasserting our dominance. And Trump's just making sure everyone knows who's in charge. And I would assume that the Europe stuff would probably get reversed sooner than perhaps the other countries. I think there's also an element that Trump might be wanting to see some changes culturally in Europe, as opposed to being like this just like massive hub of like extreme libtardation with what's happening, whether it was, the freedom of speech and all the kind of issues like that. He might be trying to like pull some levers with that as well. So I don't think it's like solely a trade issue. I think, he's just kind of using the leverage where he can.
I don't know. As far as what Armand was saying, I want to make sure that Joshua, when it comes to these negative effects that corporations are feeling right now because they're not sure what Trump is going to do, how could this be a positive in any way if this is directly impacting people's jobs, the economy, where they don't trust this guy anymore? There's been so much back and forth action that it's difficult for them to really commit to saying, okay, we're going to build our factories here, because they may think any moment, he'll change his mind, and then we're going to be royally screwed.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely a great point. And so, I think a major thing is timing and how long these things go on for. it would be great to communicate all that kind of stuff to American companies, but you can't communicate it to American companies without the rest of the world knowing what's going on as well. So the way I think of it is he's kind of got like 2 years until the midterms to kind of get everyone back on the same page and get the support of any Americans who maybe were for him and then now are kind of perhaps feeling some regret. I don't have any regrets, but again, I'm just like a sycophant plan truster.
Armando, what do you say to that? The sycophant plan trusters, plan trusters.
I want to ask Erik, right? Because Lev mentioned that you own a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
How's your Bitcoin portfolio doing right now?
It's up from $10 when I got into it, so I'm happy.
I mean, sure, but like,
no, but for real, like it's a meme that left-wing people do to try to get like the mail vote is how's your crypto doing? It's like one.
No, I mean I
don't sell one, don't sell, and two, I'm unique case because I got into it at $10 a pop per Bitcoin. And then also like things go down and like I said, even what I said earlier is there's different prioritizations. If you had focused on China and not tariffed Europe, you would have taken an economic hit for that to do even bigger tariffs on China and vice versa. Sorry, not to interrupt, but I'm okay with crypto can go down for a week and I'm happy and I don't kill myself. Like I'm okay with that.
I would just say like what we are witnessing now is one of the biggest stock market corrections in history, and it is the first one to be 100% self-induced.
Fair.
It is now bigger than what we saw in COVID. It's bigger than what we saw in 9/11, and it's entirely self-induced. And like to go back to what some of you guys were saying about like trade imbalances, like first of all, like Trump has this idea, and he's had it for a very long time, which is that trade deficit inherently means that like we're getting ripped off, right? But that isn't actually true, right? Like if I go to Taco Bell and I buy lots of tacos from them, I have a massive trade deficit. They don't buy any of my shit, but like that in of itself doesn't mean anything. And actually what happens is the only way you can have a trade deficit is if you have a capital surplus, right? Because in order for Americans to buy more foreign goods, we have to sell dollars in order to buy in their currency. And the reason people want to buy dollars is because they use those dollars partially for like global currency trading and hedging, but overwhelmingly to invest in the United States. And so the United States, because we are the richest country in the world, buys a lot from the rest of the world. And so like if you look at Botswana, for example, we have a big trade deficit with them because Botswana sells us diamonds, like big relatively, right? But they're really poor. And they're not going to spend 100% of what they earn from diamonds on like a very expensive American goods. They're a deeply poor country. But like, are we better off in a world in which they don't sell us those diamonds? Like, I guess if you don't think diamonds matter, sure. But like, and so this whole notion of trade imbalances inherently being bad is, so there are underlying problems that can lead to trade imbalances, but the balance itself is not like mean anything on its own.
I agree with you.
Yeah. As for Europe and the freedom of speech stuff, like I also think I'm American. I'm born here, raised here, but I have family from, my parents are Polish. And I've always seen my whole life there's a really big difference in freedom of speech norms between the US and Europe. And that like, for example, like in Europe, like in America, it's like unheard of that somebody could be like arrested for like a social media post unless it's like directly threatening. Versus in Europe, it's more common. And so I agree with Vance on that, but I also don't think it really makes sense to like blow up the global economy to try to change internal domestic policies of other countries. Like if they want to do it, run their own country that way, it's up to them.
I didn't think you have to tariff them to also to remove their draconian anti-free speech policies. Also, I think you probably could have just asked or put some light pressure or maybe threatened some tariffs or some sanctions, but also what the consequence of these tariffs against Europe. So I'm just so pro Europe, by the way. I'm pro Western civilization, and that's kind of how I think. And then, as you said, there's trade imbalances aren't necessarily bad, but there are some bad trade imbalances. But but not like so horrible in my mind that it needed to be done before sidelining China, and all that. And then also what these tariffs have done, like the right was, and maybe still is a bit on the rise in Europe, and I want those parties to win, and that's a great way to also get free speech back, or as some have suggested, limit free speech of leftists instead of right-wing people, which I don't agree with, but some people have suggested maybe doing it back.
Joshua, would you be for that?
I mean, on principle, you kind of don't want to be, but then you also
I think maybe for a 10-year period, it's okay, like what they've done to us. It's just reparations, then it's okay, right?
Well, Eric, you're absolutely right. It's like that it's clear that the gloves are off at this point, and it just kind of feels like an all-out culture war, and like a real one, not just like arguing about like preference and brand of breakfast cereal or something.
By the way, shout out to JJ McCullough, who's watching this right now. JJ, I want you on BTR soon, buddy. So let's figure something out. Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, Armand, what do you think about, I don't want to steer too far away from the tariffs topic, but this is an important thing that's kind of going on right now, where I think a lot of people on the right feel that they've been lambasted so long by the Democrats that now they feel, well, we just got to have a little honeymoon, maybe. We just got to have a little bit of time to, maybe deport a couple of people who were wrongfully deported, just a sprinkling of that, just to instill the fear, because this is another thing. Yesterday I was at a very interesting get together, and one of the things that I was told, which I didn't really consider before, was that you can have something that on its face is completely unfair and one can say completely evil. Armand, I think you would agree that having somebody wrongfully, we're not even talking about whether or not certain people ought to be deported, but like the people who are technically not even allowed to be deported being deported, as far as people who are already on a green card, as was with this one Venezuelan. Yeah, no, but the point is, I just
put into like an El Salvadoran gulag.
Yes, I forgot about that. That's a good point. So the point, though, here is that they were saying that, yes, it's evil and it's very regrettable for the person, but does this not also instill such a fear of people who are even thinking of crossing the border or doing something against the government that they're going to just be quieter now? And I understand that this could definitely lead into a more fascistic direction, but you at least see the point here, right? Like how they're thinking about this.
Well, I think part of what was going on, like before the election, right? There was this debate about this Biden border bill, and the right made an argument saying, like, we don't need more resources. Biden could do this stuff now. And it turned out they were correct in that there were more executive things he could do via executive order. And we saw immigration start to like lower towards the end of the election. But in the end, particularly around deportation, it just requires a lot of people to like round people up and investigate them. And that's why a lot of the people who are getting deported right now are like the people who are like low-hanging fruit, right? Like a German tourist or something that's like in an airport that you can identify. And so what I think, because Trump came into office and at first they had this vision of we're going to just start flying people out ASAP, and they're like, oh, this is actually like difficult. Like they gave up on the whole Guantanamo detention cell thing pretty quickly because it was insanely expensive. I think what they're trying to do is instill fear, right? By doing these very sort of over-the-top, outrageous, essentially trying to like create such a shock and awe that they can do deportation on the cheap or do deterrence on the cheap. I think you can accomplish this without violating the law. I mean, frankly, there are a lot of people who are criminals who don't get deported because it's harder to find and track and arrest, and criminals are hiding out by nature. So I understand what their vision is. I think sending people, particularly people who are like legally here, deporting them because they spoke out against the government or had an op-ed, like this is very different. As much as I criticized, and I honestly, you can look up on my Twitter, I thought like the Biden administration doing like indirect pressure through social media companies and so on speech was a bad thing. And I've criticized the European speech policies for a long time. Nobody got like deported or like disappeared to a black site because like because of any of their conservative speech, like during the Biden administration. This is like a whole nother level. Well, I realize that we're kind of going around. This is like conflating a lot of things, but there's the immigration thing and the free speech thing. And in both cases, I think the reaction has been crude and blunt in a way that is counterproductive.
Joshua,
but I
would
also
you
think
agree?
this is interesting that we're supposed to talk about tariffs.
Yeah.
But this is like, I think something that's like true of a lot of right-wing debate. It's like you guys are much more animated by the culture war. Even economic policy is animated by the culture war. And so we never get talking about this stuff.
Oh, definitely, we do. But Joshua, what do you think about Armand? Do you agree with him on this? Or do you think the pressure is needed for some kind of a greater goal here?
Well, that's the thing. I think he correctly identifies why the right is doing what it's doing. Is it is extremely hard to find people and deport them. So the best way to deport people is to either make them fear that they're going to be sent to a country that they don't actually belong to in some horrible prison, or prevent them from coming in the first place by being over the top, right? Because it is much harder, like I said, to do it. So you want to make them make the decisions and have the behavior that makes the job easier for the American people and our immigration system. He brought up like the culture war thing, and that's a huge part of it. And I was in I have a group chat with some friends from college, it's fairly evenly split left and right. And a lot of the more liberal people, make comments, in regards to like Doge, for instance, like if this is about, spending and cutting money, why don't they go after the military? And it's like, spending is a huge part of it, but a major part is trying to root out all of what we believe to be subversive elements in like every single level of our government institutions. Yeah. And so you're kind of trying to, that's the whole point of MAGA, is to take the country back on a full wide scale at every level that you can.
Yeah, but isn't that what the Soviets said? During Stalin's time, they were also talking about getting rid of all the subversive elements, and we saw what that resulted in. So that's the question, like, are we, or maybe we should just admit that, what, founding fathers, we tried our best, we failed, this is the best we can do now.
Well, but again, that comes back to the argument that, all of us right-wingers have, is like the left has been trying to do this or has been doing this to us, and that all of these institutions are already fairly decidedly left-wing.
I don't know, Armand, would you say that Joshua was right about the level at which the left has been doing it before Trump?
Well, I would say one thing is that, like, in terms of government employment, specifically federal government, because it has this really strong preference for hiring veterans, to the point, because I've known people who've gone through the process where there are candidates who are like extremely well qualified, like PhDs, like have been doing like this kind of research that the government wants them to do forever, but they're not a veteran and they can get, pushed fast. And in general, I think it's good for the federal government to provide hiring preference for veterans. We should support our vets. But that actually makes it so that the federal government is one of the least, is less like left-leaning in terms of the actual people employed by it than like universities, for example. And so you're saying like at the USDA, like, and at the Park Service, like lots and lots of people who aren't like Marxist ideologues or whatever, who are also getting kicked out because the tools available to Elon, like it's much easier to hire, for example, like probationary employees, right? And so it's not like you're going through the people and picking like, who fits your vision of policy or not. You're saying, I can fire people who started recently or who got promoted recently or switched jobs within the government recently, and you're slashing it that way. And like a lot of this would be done a lot more productively if the original vision of Doge is like we figure out what we want to do, what to cut, and then we control Congress so we can pass laws to do this.
Erik, I'm curious.
So you walk in to any department of government, at least in my experience, it doesn't look like some George Bush veteran commune here. It is entirely leftists.
I mean, how
90%.
do you deal with?
What federal agencies do I deal with? I have friends that have been all of them. I've toured all of them. I've had people, one of my friends, in Trump's first term, he was at HUD, and he was like, I walked in and I'm like, man, it looks like the Death Star in here. It's depressing. And then he said, shut the fuck up. He said, everyone's a leftist here. Everyone leaks. And then I look at these buildings. And again, you could say this is just my personal biased experience here, but it's not some George Bush, Iraq war, hoorah, vet group. It is leftist. And to say otherwise is complete, with love and affection and polite debate, complete obfuscation. It is just not true that it's the center right. It is left wing. It is center left. And some of these center left people are super competent. My mom was on the NASA transition team. She dealt with leftist civil servants. They were competent, and all of that. And that's fine. But they were left wing. And very much so, and everything. And but it's just not. They're not Bush people. What you think of like the stereotype of a veteran? They're not Reagan, H.W. Bush. They're not vet people.
It is 31% of the federal workforce though, and that's largely because like the Department of Veteran Affairs, Department of Defense, all have like huge amounts of employees.
So 69% mostly left wing, and then probably some of those veterans are left wing, right? I mean, that's my read of it, because it's just so far left, these departments. Again, totally biased. So on one hand, it's like I'm seeing it with my own eyes, but that could be from a biased eyes.
You got to also think about like the agency. Like HUD is 100% going to be. If you think about this,
no, but I've done justice. I've toured energy. I've toured. I think. Yeah. Almost all the departments except 2 or something like that. I've HHS. My friend was chief counsel at the FDA. My current lawyer is chief counsel at the FDA, and all that, and everything. So I mean, they're 69% non-veteran, and then some of those veterans are left wing, and then some of those non-veterans could be right wing. But it's just so 31% does not make me go, wow, this is so George Bush center right, kind of what you think of as like veterans that are working in the civil service or would be working in the civil service. Anyways, sorry not to be loud and polite here.
So what Erik was talking about right now, this is from his own perspective. We don't have a spreadsheet of the political affiliation of every single government employee.
Very true.
But Armand, if you were to take what Erik says, like in good faith, where do you think there could possibly be some room for disagreement, or would you pretty much agree with Erik's estimation of how much the far left people dominated the government?
I mean, I don't know how many of them are far left. I'm a Democrat, and Republicans will call me far left, but then I get yelled at by communists all day on Twitter. So, but it is very certainly true that like the majority of people who work for the federal government are Democrats or Democratic leaning. In large part, it's like we live in an era of educational polarization, and so. If you go to college, you're significantly more likely to be a Democrat. If you're non-college educated, significantly more likely to be a Republican. And the sort of person, there's job sorting, right? In the sense that like the sort of person who wants to join the military is a lot more conservative, or become a cop is a lot more conservative. The sort of person who wants to become a theater director, right? Or a government employee. I think regardless of ideology, every president should be able to staff the administration of people who agree with their views. I don't think that you can't function as a society if you fire and hire every single person who works in the entire government every 4 years. Like, you can change the ideological vision at the top, and you can try to create a different culture at the bottom to ensure that like people are complying. But we can't function as a society if like a Democratic president wins, and so we fire like all the way down to the people at like your Social Security office,
Well, we could bring this back to the tariffs discussion, because if we're talking about loyalty, and I really want to get Bog Beef on the stream later on to talk about this, because a big thing with him has been this relationship between the patron and the people that are being patronized. Speaking of which, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron right now. I'm sending the link in the chat for all of you guys to do that. But anyway, the idea is that ideally we would have people who are, philosophically minded men of letters like Washington and Jefferson and all those people from back in the day, right? That would be the ideal. And those people would definitely, even if they disagree, appreciate having some kind of pushback just in case their view of the situation may have certain gaps in it. The concern, though, now is that the people, and this is like both for the Biden administration that was passed as well as the Trump administration, the concern is that if it's just about loyalty, if it's just about patronage, you're not really going to probably get that many people who are going to, be like that meme of the guy standing up in the town hall, everybody looks at him, and he says the thing that nobody else was brave enough to say. That's the real concern here, that with these tariffs, is it possibly a matter of not having some master plan, but these elements that, Erik, you've agreed, and Joshua, I think you've also agreed to a good extent, could have been done in a different way. That whole could have been done in a different way, to me, speaks volumes. It speaks about this insulation that may unfortunately be happening and how exactly we can break out of it. But first, do you guys even agree with that? And also for all the people who are listening on the X space, go click the YouTube link in the Jumbotron. That's where the YouTube is, and subscribe. Anyway, would you agree, Joshua, with what I said here, or disagree, or let me know?
Yeah, well, I think there's, again, like what I was saying before about if Trump were to communicate all the nuances of his plan to every, level of American industry and all the business people so they can plan accordingly, then the rest of the world knows your plan too. So there's, I would assume that what the conversations that are happening behind closed doors, there's likely a reason or a method behind the madness, or potentially part of that method is kind of throwing some chaos into the mix. But I have confidence that there's a general longer vision to why they're approaching things in this way. So yes, I recognize that a lot of the American people might be like, what the hell is going on? But I have faith that there is, behind closed doors, there might be disagreement. There might be people going, oh, well, what about this? And then there's some kind of deliberation about how that should be approached, with the greater vision being the goal, and then they just follow it as needed.
Before we go to Erik and Armand, why do you personally think that loyalty and the patronage system I mentioned would not be such a crucial factor here as to overwhelm any kind of dissent?
Well, loyalty doesn't require like brown nosing yes men entirely, right? Like, I think that men of high stature who have accomplished a lot in their lives likely value people who are close to them, who kind of give. I mean, for me, one of my closest friends was kind of a person who said something which, if anyone else had said it, it would have been kind of viewed as like an extreme attack. But because there's a level of respect and faith that this person cares about me, and we have whether it be a shared vision or wants what's good for me, then the criticism actually becomes a positive element. So, it's possible that Trump is a kind of person who, with such an ego, that anyone who dares say anything wrong. But I think that Trump is someone who has tried to listen to and get advice from people close to him so that he can get the most success. Because what I think Trump wants more than anything is to be like the best president ever, right? Like, he wants America to be the greatest thing it could be. And so if he's getting advice from people, the people closest to him, the people that he trusts, then, I would think that he would be looking for people who could, it's not like everything is his plan that he wrote up all himself, right? He has all these people who he trusted to come up with these things, and experts in various fields that go, there's like that saying, like, Trump kind of believes like the last thing that the person that he likes told him, kind of a thing, which, I think is absolutely, there's a very true element to that. And so if he trusts someone and he likes them and they say, I think we should do this, that's kind of what I think is what makes up the plan, is like these kinds of people around him, his council and his cabinet.
Erik, do you agree?
Yeah, to Armand's point, actually, I think there's, well, before I get to that, there's times where you need to, like Nixon, I have a secret plan to end the war in Vietnam. Trump, I have a secret plan to end ISIS. There are times when, whether those were actually secret plans at the time, like, or not, there's a time for a secret plan, and then there's a time to bring kind of push clarity to the business community of the United States and the world. And I think tariff strategy is probably one of them. I don't see what the benefit would be to not being clear on it. I only see cons to not being clear on what the goal of this is, and confidence that this is a strict plan that we're sticking with. Because there is like a little bit like, will he change his mind next week? And if he changes his mind in next week or in 6 months or in a year, was it really worth it to do all this upfront capital to move my factory to the US that costs more money? So I think it's, to Armand's point on that front, there's not a confident, clear message. There's a messages and all that, but I don't know. And then to actually get to, this is maybe, and I'm totally open, and I don't know if we want to even steer the conversation back to this, but I'm totally open actually to, presidents being able to do what they were elected to do with people that are loyal to them. I want Obama to do what he was elected to do without Bush people trying to internally sabotage him. I want Trump and Biden to do what they were elected to do without internal people sabotaging them. And I think one of the beauties of DC is that there are people that actually spend time just staffing, doing the most boring stuff that's really important in government, such as really boring regulations about crops or really boring staffing decisions. And I think it should be on the party or on some think tank to say, this is who should be pushing papers in the Social Security Administration and all that. So I'm actually open to people hiring and firing the entirety of government. And probably the first 2 times you allow that, it'll be hugely messy and really probably unfortunately mess up people's lives. But I think after the people pay the political consequences of that, then I think people will get the point that you really do have to, have some smart person deciding who's going to push papers at the Social Security Administration, even at the lowest level. So I'm open to totally, that's a completely dumb idea. I see it would just absolutely initially cause pain for innocent people. But I think on net people would figure it out, and it would be more democratic in the long run, because just human nature is just if you're on the opposition party, to sabotage the main boss if you disagree with the party that won. And I just want to get rid of that. That Obama wasn't able to do a lot of what he wanted to do. Trump wasn't able to. And also, last thing, on the plan trusting as a based right winger, true American patriot.jpg, I saw what trusting the plan got us in the first 4 years. And actually, I think it was the pain and suffering of losing and the learned lessons of people blindly is a strong word, but half blindly or 1/4 blindly trusting the plan that led to a much better Trump administration in the second term, much better staffing decisions, and hopefully will lead to a really great end of a second term. We'll see. He could totally fuck it up. We'll see.
Before Armand responds, because I see the gears turning in his head, I recall the scenario of a young Jewish kid with a Jewish mother who constantly likes feeding him all these large portions of food every day, versus his bodybuilding trad Jewish dad who discovered all these online influencers and is trying to get his son to get in shape and become trad like Joshua Rayner over here. Who would the kid initially, like little kid doesn't know anything, who would the kid prefer to spend more time with? The mom who keeps giving him tendies, or the dad who's forcing him to go outside all the time? The reason I say this is I would not I would not equate the dad to these leftist activists that want to stymie and destroy any kind of cohesion within the MAGA movement. I would use the example of the dad as maybe certain figures within the Republican Party who want to voice a kind of dissent to actually help in the long run, but those things may be ignored because the majority of the people around Trump does not believe that to be the case. So that's my main concern about loyalty. I don't know, Armand, would you agree with me on this? Let me know what you think.
I'm not sure what I'm agreeing with.
with the fact that you have people in the Republican Party who may want to dissent against Trump, but are afraid of doing so because they're going to be cast out. And it's not because they want to do something bad. It's not because they want to ruin MAGA. It's because they think that it's going in the wrong direction, but because they're not part of, let's say, a certain bubble, a certain echo chamber, they don't have a shot. And that's the concerning thing. It's not like these leftist activists that you could say were associated with some of the people in Trump's first term. I'm talking specifically people who actually want to help, but they end up getting ignored because of this particular loyalty thing.
Well, the thing about so I came up during the Obama era, and one of the things I noticed was that during the Obama era, the ideological dividing line of the Republican Party was taxation and spending, right? No Republican would vote for any sort of tax increase, and no Republican would vote for any spending increase unless it was offset by other spending cuts. Nowadays, the Republican Party is a lot more ideologically flexible. You have people who are very free market, and then people who are very protectionist on trade, for example. You have a coalition includes RFK Jr. and Mitch McConnell. But I think that also creates a thing where it's the one dividing line is you have to be loyal to Trump. And if you criticize him on anything, you're out of the party. And so you've got like Matt Gaetz, if you looked at his voting record, people think he's super MAGA, but he had relatively more left-wing positions on marijuana, for example, than other folks. And then people who are Chip Roy in Congress is super right-wing on everything. But because he's clashed with Trump, he's considered not in good standing. So I think having entire political party where the ideology is what does Daddy Trump want does not seem healthy to me. I
like this comment over here from Roger OK Guerra. If you don't support the trade war, you're woke. You're woke. Okay,
I want to go back to something about earlier about Trump and the experts around him. So this guy named Pete Navarro, he was one of the major figures for trade policy for Trump. And the reason that Pete Navarro is in the White House is because Jared Kushner at one point wanted to find an expert or somebody who's close enough to being an expert to support the views that Trump already had on trade. And so he looked in Amazon for who wrote books about trade against China, and he found Pete Navarro. And so it's not the case that's oh, there are all these smart experts around Trump and they're helping him formulate policy. Particularly on trade, Trump has been very consistent since the 80s, where he thinks that trade between the United States and other countries is always a ripoff, that we're getting scammed, that the existence of a trade deficit is a sign that we're getting ripped off somehow. And he has built people around him and found people around him who agree with that view. And that's part of why the messaging is so coherent, is because everyone's trying to construct some ideology around this thing when it's just one man's really strong belief in something. And on a lot of different things, Trump could flip back and forth because he doesn't really have strong convictions. But on trade is one thing he's believed this for his entire life, and he finally has a chance to do something about it, and he's doing it.
Fair enough. I don't know. I mean, the trade question, I want to bring in certain comments from Didier. I'm not sure where he is because he said that he was going to be in this chat, but I'm just going to read over here some of the views that he personally has on these. But before I do so, once again, all the people who are watching this in the X Spaces, click the Jumbotron YouTube link, go to YouTube, subscribe on the BTR YouTube, help this thing grow, add a like, and also sneed those super chats. I want to get more money. So here we go. Scrolling down here. We're talking about migration. We're talking about this. We're talking about that. Okay, I'm not able to find it right now. I'm going to keep looking for it, and I want him back here in the chat. But Eric, how would you reply to... No, let's go to Joshua. You haven't spoken in a while. How would you reply to Armand's view here?
Well, about someone like Navarro not necessarily being some expert, just the guy who agrees with Trump.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, when I sort of was saying that, there are people around Trump and various experts, I was making a comment to what you were saying about just pure blind loyalty where no one would even dare disagree with Trump. It sounds like, Eric brought up Trump's first term, right? And one of the major things was not that he had too many people that agreed with him. It's that he just had the wrong people around him in general that had different views, and Trump didn't really know how Washington worked, so to speak. And so it seems like, now, like what Armand is saying is, I don't think Trump really is too concerned with anyone else's opinion on trade. I think he's like, I know what I want out of trade. Let me get someone who maybe has the bona fides to explain it to the people, versus all the other issues where Trump is actually looking for far more input from people on how to do things. And so it's, not so much the trade, but everything else, that he's actually getting other people's perspectives, getting plans from them, and then integrating them, where, trade is just kind of his thing for a very long time.
So I do have the comments over here now from Didier, and Didier, I know you're in the chat, so please write more of them as well. One comment that he left over here: with the level of education the West has, who is going to work 12 hours in an iPhone factory? I dealt with Gen Z when I was a CFO, CTO at startups, and wow. Any thoughts?
There are a lot of people who need jobs, right? And there's a lot of people who do manual labor already, right?
There are, but the question is, are they going to do manual labor? And we're not talking about the migrants, because there are migrants who are both, legal, illegal, who, there are still programs kind of like the Gulf states and Singapore has in bulk. There are such programs still in the United States where you can be a temporary migrant working here, and those may not be the kind of jobs that Americans would want to do. That's different than, let's say, something a little bit more, specialized, something that's not going to be as mechanized. I just don't know how many Americans want to be like Lucy in that I Love Lucy skit with the chocolates. You remember where she had to pack one chocolate after another? Like, that does
You're
not
like the
sound
oldest man alive. Your references are like of a man who's like 30 years older than you.
Well, I mean, you don't know how old I am. That's
true.
I probably have a portrait of myself that's decaying as we speak.
I thought you were going to do a Laverne and Shirley thing from the working in a bottle factory or something like that.
No, they stole that from I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy was like the original one, where the chocolate machine kept getting faster and faster and faster, or maybe Charlie Chaplin was the first one. Anyway, besides the point, you get what I'm saying, right? Like, that's a comedy skit. It's not what Americans, even those that work in manufacturing, would want to spend the majority of time doing. Would that be something that Americans would even adopt now, this kind of lifestyle?
Well, I saw a great tweet. I don't know who it was from, but it basically meant, it said there's so many Americans working in Amazon warehouses right now, right? And so, instead of the products being built in China and then they package and move things around, like, all those people are working jobs which are something of the sort of being in a warehouse and moving things around. So, yeah, maybe it requires more skill to be a traditional factory worker, but maybe there would be then increased pay than just, isn't that what the Amazon people complain about? Is like terrible conditions and not enough pay. So perhaps something that looks more like a factory would be a better work environment. Yeah.
Well, go on.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, Lutnick, he was talking about how, quote, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to come to America. And he was talking about this along with automation. So that's the other question. If we're talking about the idea that automation is going to take over a lot of these jobs, then what jobs are we even talking about by that point? Or are we talking about some rug pull where maybe initially Americans will have those jobs, but then they'll start to get automated, and now we're back to Americans not having jobs anymore? So, Armand, I'm curious, do you see something like this potentially happening here?
Well, the first thing I would say is, if your goal is to bring back manufacturing, it makes no sense to be doing tariffs on everything. The way that a tariff can work is that ultimately, while there are folks who are unemployed, and going to be a lot more now, we have some of the highest levels of employment for people of prime working age in U.S. history. Most of the people who are out of the workforce are people who are seniors who retired a lot early during COVID. And so when you do these shifts, while you may get some people who are out of the workforce into the workforce, it will primarily be people who are currently working jobs who will move to different things. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, who am I shifting into what industry, and is that a better decision? And if you're tariffing like bananas at the same time as you're tariffing manufacturing, like it's not really working. Putting it aside, even that very question, it's the reason I don't like to when people make these arguments about like, oh, well, Americans are too lazy to do these jobs or whatever. It's more that we're a rich country. Even like the most entry level job in the United States pays significantly more than like a median job in China. And so it is very hard economically to make those like economics work. And so the only way you could do it is like you could pass a law saying Americans can only buy iPhones made in America, but nobody else is going to buy those because they're going to be way too expensive. And so you don't really have an export industry. And the way that manufacturing works in the United States, primarily, it's like advanced manufacturing, where there's fewer people, more robots, and those jobs pay a lot better. But what we've seen is, the U.S. has, I believe, like the second highest manufacturing output in the entire world, but way less employment. It's like agriculture. Like over time, like it became more and more automated. We produce a ton of food, but way less people work on farms. And just the whole notion that like, we want to move back lower down the value chain of economics, like is kind of strange. Like, for example, like there's a company that produces like advanced like airplane parts, and they have to like say like we might have to invoke clauses that like end our contracts because we rely on a lot of like basic input goods from overseas, and now the economics not work. And really, this whole vision is to like get people out of the advanced manufacturing, which pays better, and into like t-shirt making. And that doesn't make sense. Like, we are a rich country. We should try to get richer, not poorer.
To Didier's comment over here, by the way, what's the percentage of America who do these kinds of jobs? So the kinds, Armand, you were just talking about, like the t-shirt manufacturing.
Total manufacturing employment is, I think, like, I don't know, somewhere between 10 to 20%. Yeah.
And again, how many of those people are we talking about are the contractual migrants, as well as people who are illegally in the country that are doing more of these sweatshop type jobs? Because that's what I don't understand here. Like with Trump's plan, is it a matter of having more of these sweatshop style jobs coming into the country where the people who are unemployed right now in the United States would have kind of no choice but to take those jobs now? So, Erik, I think you have something on your mind there. What do you think?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, a lot to say in the sense that one, I think it's good to have t-shirt manufacturing in the U.S. I think it's good to know, to do that, or to have pillow manufacturing. Not that I'm a My Pillow QAnon person. I remember the My Pillow guy said, and I don't know if this was true, he could have been lying, but he said, but I think there's a directional truth to it, is that, he said, we really didn't know how to make a pillow top to bottom. And he said he created a factory to make a pillow top to bottom. And I have no idea if that's true, but that is definitely true of some products here in the US. My larger view is at a higher level. And then, well, actually, before I get into that, and two, and I'm definitely not the first to say this, a lot of smart people on Twitter have said this, even if you have robots do all these jobs, you'll have secondary jobs that facilitate a robot-run factory that do hire more humans, and then and then the robots work cheaper than Chinese people do, or Vietnamese people, or slave labor in the rest of these countries. So I think that's still good. And then also, this is a very pre-Trump Republican point of view, which is rather than doing tariffs, although I support actually carrot and a stick approach, and again would prefer to focus on China first, but let's say we're not, is to create a better business environment, lower taxes on businesses, lower, deregulate more, build up opportunities zones, which is a very, Paul Ryan, point of view, although I don't think you'll ever reach parity with it being immensely cheaper to manufacture in the US, but you can improve those conditions to make it a little bit sweeter to do stuff in the US. But the problem is you can't lower taxes that drastically. Like if you got rid of, the business side of the income tax, one, that's politically unpopular. And two, we have a $2 trillion deficit because of all of our welfare programs, which you couldn't get rid of politically. So it's a tough It's a very tough problem. Like a lot of libertarians say, you can have quote unquote open borders, you just can't have a welfare state, right? Because then that, if you didn't have a welfare state, maybe people want to come here and work hard. Maybe that's a different argument, right? But that's the problem, is all these programs. But again, to my larger point of view is maybe I gave a speech about this recently, which is I said maybe it's okay to have kind of our trinkets and our cheaper goods be manufactured in China. I think the problem was in the 70s when we were, the West was making Concords and supersonic jets. We were going to the moon and we were building new nuclear reactors. Maybe the Rust Belt should have gone to creating assembly lines of Saturn V's and Concords. Rather than going to, staying with kind of mass-produced car manufacturing or trinket manufacturing. Maybe that's okay. I think China probably should have been where it is at now. But the problem is we just took this 50-year detour. I personally think in unfunded liabilities and caring more about actually leftist culture war issues rather than focused on actually building upon or even just continuing to build what we have. I mean, to see that, we don't have Skylab. The ISS is a dump and always has been. Skylab was way cooler. We gave up on supersonic jets. And I think the U.S. purposely lied and maneuvered to shut down, any supersonic travel for commercial flights over mainlands could only be over the ocean. Then we lied and said and funded, I think, environmental groups to say it hurts the ozone layer or whatever. And then say, I don't know, same with nuclear reactors, but we gave up on nuclear reactors, or we gave up on energy too cheap to meter. I think that's where those jobs should have gone. And I wouldn't have been mad with cheap goods and building up a nice, back in the 70s, a nice relatively third world country to where it is now. We just took a 50-year detour and completely fucked it up. That's kind of my view of it. And I kind of resent that we're in this position where we have to, where it actually really does matter that I think for jobs and for people to bring this manufacturing back, because we really are so far behind relative to where we could have gone due to leftist culture war issues back in the 70s and on.
And I really want to hear Armand's reply, but first, Joshua, do you agree with everything Erik has to say?
The stuff that Erik said that I was familiar with, yes, and the stuff that I'm not, I'm just going to take his word for it. It sounded good, so let's go with that.
Okay, sounds good.
That's all that matters, right?
All right, Armand, this is a really big differentiator between the two of you guys, because I think you were more supportive of a lot of these more progressive causes and the various acts that were done during this time. Erik's point is that no, most of these were mistakes. They shouldn't have gone as far as they did, and there could have been other ways to make America more prosperous without having, like poor people dying in the streets. So I don't know, Armand. Yeah.
There are two books out right now around the theme of abundance. One by Erik Finman and Derek Thompson, and one called Why Nothing Works by Mark Dunkelman. And Dunkelman's book actually provides like a historical perspective, which is that post World War II, if you look at, for example, housing, we had some of the highest rates of housing construction in the history of the United States. And this happened up through like the 40s and 50s. And this created a backlash of anti-growth sentiment. And things like Ralph Nader, for example, started creating what's called like the public interest law legal movement, which sued for, people know him for suing for like safety for auto manufacturers, but they also expanded things like the National Environmental Protection Act to basically say that like anything the federal government builds or is on federal land or touches the federal government anyway has to undergo like really long litigation and reviews. There were zoning laws, but like specifically the two things you touched on, the Concord and nuclear energy, were both things that were sort of caught by this like anti-pro-growth backlash. And it is very much a problem of the left, where like the left moved away from New Deal liberalism, which is like build lots of things, to a sort of like a new left environmentalism, which is we need to stop the government from doing lots of things. And nuclear got caught by like Greenpeace and like the environmental movement, even though it's, if we kept building nuclear plants like we did back then, we'd have an energy grid as clean as France and produce way less CO2. And then the second thing on the Concord is like the Concord, there were environmental groups who were like concerned about the ozone, but most of it was just what we call NIMBYism, which is that people didn't like the sonic booms. which is fair. Like they're annoying and they're loud, but like a lot of like that era of time was about giving a lot of power to like people who are near things, who can obstruct things and block things. And so the Concorde was banned from doing transcontinental flights specifically because people were like, I don't want this loud noise near me when it takes off or when it lands. And we didn't take the larger view of like, okay, it'll be noisy in those places, but like we'll dramatically transform the economy and build advanced things and so on. And there's like, it's funny that you touched on those two things. Those are both two things that are very much like a victim of essentially NIMBYism and this era of liberalism that empowered that. Like we moved away when Ralph Nader ran for president in 2000, and they asked him what he was like biggest credential was to run for president. It wasn't like I did all these great liberal things. It's nobody has sued the government more than me. Which, if you think about it, right, like Reagan's whole thing was like the scariest words you can hear. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. And the embodiment of like some of the most left-wing people in America was, I stopped the government from doing lots of things. And so I 100% agree. Like one of the major, like, I think a lot of reason people are yearning, frankly, for like nostalgia and return to that time is just housing is insanely expensive. And if you look at a map, how much housing we built, or a graph per person, per capita, it like basically peaks in 1970. And even the 2008 boom was nowhere close. Like we just stopped building it. We stopped building things, period.
Do you think, by the way, that it's tied at the hip, Armand, when we're talking about the ideal kind of FDR tier, progressive in the sense of advancing technology type of thing, being tied at the hip with a lot of these NIMBYists as well, where you can't really now extract one from the other? There's always going to be a lot of these progressive causes that have to do with, saving some sea turtle or whatever, and those things are always going to be connected to people who are part of the larger Democrat umbrella, and there's no way to get rid of that.
Well, I think what you're saying, it's like very generational in that there are people like Democrats care about the environment, but young Democrats are supportive of like building dense housing because they understand that that's less CO2 intensive, people walk more, it leaves less energy. Versus older Democrats, often like people in the Sierra Club, will be like, we should like, I don't protect my view, I don't like apartments near me, like stuff like that. And so we do, the anti-growth backlash to like the era of growth was not out of nowhere. Like I think the LA River used to like catch on fire. Like we had a lot of just really smog was horrendous and a major issue in big cities. But the way that we did it was to create like endless avenues for endless review, endless litigation, and like even the way that like the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA, and CEQA in California, which is similar, the way they work is not, you're not allowed to do these bad things. It's, you have to study all the potential bad things you could do, and we'll sue you if you don't study it enough. But like, you can always make up a new thing that you didn't study, because no study will study the infinite consequences of the universe. Which is why in like California, they're like, we sued because you didn't study the impact of new students having parties, which will cause noise, which is an environmental impact. And that like blocked student housing for a while. And so I think there is a place, like the Democrats and leftists will always be like more concerned by nature about the environment and potentially the rights. There'll be that tension. But I think that the way the left goes about environmentalism is really flawed, and we're fighting a struggle in our own party to change that.
As far as Joshua and Erik go, I don't know who is more right-wing, but a question for both of you regarding what Armand talked about right now. When it comes to people who are further on the right, like the 4chan people, they have this nightmare scenario in their heads when they think of more apartment housing being built to be habitats for all these people. Their mind is going into favelas. So it's the worst of both worlds in their minds of, number one, not having a lot of this great technology that, Erik, you were talking about. But number two, babysitting people who end up being like this permanent underclass that's now always dependent on daddy government to sustain just their living, but they're not really living to do anything. They're just existing. I don't know if that is a fair way to look at the 4chan view or the right-wing view. I know Joshua or Eric, whoever wants to take this, do you see that being a potential concern when it comes to how people who are more on the, I wouldn't say left, but like more on Armand's side, certain things that they may want to do could possibly result in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to deport millions and millions and millions of people, and as far as building housing, that'll free up a lot of housing. But yes, the favela thing is very commonly discussed in anywhere that I spend my time online, and it's you don't want just unlimited density. You want some open space. You want some space between different kinds of people, and so there's areas for density and there's areas for less density, and what you want is you want the freedom to live in a high density area and then live in a lower density area, and that's part of what creates different types of cities and towns and cultural and economic elements. But yes, yeah, you mentioned they're kind of just creating housing to quite literally just house people and have them just sort of exist. And what is it that they're doing? But it's not like you just kind of go in and just like start kind of like eliminating, to put it nicely, just all the unproductive people in the country, in the world. But what you can do is you can just to start deport the people who aren't American and free up a lot of space. And that's the thing is when you lend things towards a meritocracy and that type of system, then things kind of sort themselves out more. But when we are, like Eric was saying, we're literally providing welfare to non-Americans, it's just like, there's no system that can sustain that.
The problem with density that I see, and one, I totally agree with everything that you said, Josh, but density is not inherently bad. You go to a lot of cities in Western Europe that's very high density, but I think it's the people that make up these places. I think, it's an immigration issue from people from third world countries that, understandably coming, like if you brought me into the year 3000, I would probably be a criminal, and then again, that's a strong word actually, but I'd probably be a leech on society. Again, that's still too strong. I got to be careful. But I would struggle in the year 3000, and maybe that makes me resort to make a different thing, make different decisions for my life.
You got to grow your blonde hair longer, and you have to wear a blue turtleneck as opposed to
exactly
white
blue turtleneck, and then the beard.
You have to learn no beard. You have to learn how to speak High German. And then you're going to fit in.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, this is taking a different turn. I get accused of someone who speaks High German a lot, even though I have no German blood. But I get that a lot.
You do dress like a Bond villain. So.
I literally get that all the time, and I don't know. I just like Suit Supply. Suit Supply's they got good mannequin fits that I steal. So, anyways, but yeah. So I think that's it, and I think it's an immigration thing, and I think it's an education thing. So even if you have, I don't know. I have to be careful with my words, but I think there needs to be better education systems, because I grew up in an all what people on the internet would say homogenized area, and the school system was terrible, and everything, and you could say it was all homogenous, right? And so I think it's improving education and it's improving immigration, and also a lot of people on the right complained about this. I'm totally on board with this in a different way. Lithuania, they revoked citizenship from 80,000 Russians that had Lithuanian citizenship. And then the stated reason was they did not throw a parade for Zelensky or an anti-Russia parade or something like that. And I'm totally, not even against that. So there was a Supreme Court ruling, I think probably back in the Warren Court, if not a little later, that made it so you can't revoke citizenships of people and everything. Like Armand, I want his citizenship revoked. Did he participate in a Trump victory party? If he did not, I want his passport shredded. Kidding. But
there's
but
always
I think
Poland, Armand.
Yeah, but this is what's interesting about Europe, right? Is Europe does not have necessarily strong constitutional protections. You can do a lot more there. The cap of the United States is maybe a 30% more extreme Trump. The cap of Europe, communist, or the opposite side of communist, is the cap there, and everything. So I think you can kind of do more things there, whether that be create a Mitt Romney level utopia, a communist level utopia, a center left abundance Ezra Klein, hail Ezra Klein, utopia, or some other type of different version of government. That's the cap there, and that's the pros and cons between the U.S. and here, because with the U.S. you're working with tough stuff. I think a lot of the subtext of why people are environmentalists, or especially the older leftists, is that like I kind of don't want poor people moving to my neighborhood. I think that is kind of the subtext, and then poor. Why do they not want these groups? Because it's not just an economic reason; it's an education reason, and I think it's an immigration reason. And I don't think they want to. And you even have like rich minority, super rich people like I can't pronounce the name, the venture capitalist, Vinod Khosla, Indian guy, and all that. But he's like spiritually very Western, right? Like this is actually like, I'm kind of open to like race being kind of a social construct, because I've met people even whiter than me spiritually, that are like, I don't want them living near me. I don't want other poor Indians living there. I've heard rich Indians literally tell me, basically that, and I think that's a lot of the subtext to it, and they're like, no, it's just I don't want, it's going to hurt a turtle, that's why I don't want that apartment building there. And I think Ezra actually has talked about this in previous podcasts, or I don't think he put it in his book. I have his book, I haven't read it yet, but I was open to it because Ezra says some interesting things. I think they're negated by his hypocrisy. But he does actually say some interesting things, so I'm excited to read it. Even though he kind of changes his view. Anyways, I'm done. I don't know where to end this point, but that's kind of my view. Immigration, education issue.
Well, I want to address what you were talking about with this comment from Galen Didier, who is one of the biggest BTR supporters of all time, and that's why I'm giving him this preferential treatment. So if you guys want preferential treatment, patreon.com/breaktherules. Anyway, he says over here, but again, with higher education, you get less people willing to work industry. If you remove immigration, then you just increase the cost of human capital. I don't know, what do you think? Before anybody else responds, Erik, since this is addressing what you were talking about, any counterpoints to that?
Let me read the question again. But again, with higher ed, I was reading the comments, but I wasn't focusing on you listening to this specific content. But again, with higher ed, you get less people willing to work industry. If you remove immigration, then you just increase the cost of human capital. Fair question. I guess, yeah, I am from Idaho, and maybe it's because the education system is terrible there and someone needs to fix it, is you actually see tons of construction workers that are Idahoan, look very Captain America looking, and then that's like when people say that Mexicans are doing the jobs Americans won't do, I don't think that's the case, but that may prove his point that on education on that front. But I think there will always be people willing to do these type of jobs, and maybe I'm naive on that front, but also robots will literally do all of these jobs. So and maybe this is a controversial take, and it's not even a take that I have, but it's a question: is can the U.S. economy survive without slave labor? I think we say we banned slave labor back in the 1800s. We fought a war over it. We just outsourced it. I mean, it is insane the amount of slavery that keeps up the world economy, and maybe having robots do an even work harder as slaves, but thankfully they're just robots and have no soul to them. That's okay. But it's just kind of interesting to me. I don't know if I'm really great at answering this question on this front. I do think robots will solve that problem eventually. And I think that in between the time when robots are solving that problem and you could snap your fingers and bring all the manufacturing here, short-term economic problems aside, which is a big thing to put aside, I think you would absolutely have a ton of people. Like, this country needs so much more education, improved education. I think even our best schools I'm very passionate about education. My first startup was an ed tech startup, which I sold. I'm so passionate about education. It's terrible in the US. And even in the places that do it well, like people say Norway, it's not good enough. We're not selecting for great geniuses or producing great geniuses. They succeed in spite of even some of our best systems. My parents went to Stanford. My brother did MIT and everything. And I'm a high school dropout because I was mad about the education system. Education system is just so bad, even at the Ivy League level. It needs to be better. So I think that there's a lot of time before we're faced with the problem that's with this question. That's his question's asking.
Joshua, Armand, any responses to that question as well? If we're talking about these schooling programs that are hopefully of a Soviet Union tier level, because my parents, when they came to the United States, I always talk about this, how shocked they were by the low levels of the education here. So the third grade of American education to them was like, like kindergarten, or like their third grade was our high school. That's the difference we're talking about here. But if that were to be fixed, though, if you were to have people who are well educated all of a sudden, would they still have to go to the t-shirt factory or to the chocolate factory or to whichever factory to do this manual labor until the robots come? And if that's the case, do they even have time for the education or for as much education as needed for them to be specialists? And even if they get that education, are we going to have as many opportunities for those specialists, before the robots come again? Are we going to have enough room for those specialists versus just having an overflow of there's a word for it, right? Like an overflow of elites, like an over multiplication of these elites.
Overproduction of elite, yeah.
Thank you, Armand. Overproduction of elites. Isn't that a concern too? That with this education, they'll be smart, they probably know how to do things, but there's not going to be enough opportunities for them to do those things. I don't know, Armand. What do you think? Is that a legitimate concern?
I mean, the thing about market economies is they're dynamic, they're changing, they're unpredictable. Nature of life, and that's part of what makes them dynamic and they grow. But it's also like why this sort of, I think both on the left and now with these Trump tariffs, this desire to control every individual thing and precisely guide it the way you want is often misguided. And that's really why trade really works, is because when you can, like China, part of the reason that China's economy is so big is just China is very big. It's a giant free trade zone. And so, for example, if every person in America had to just build their own car, we'd have a lot less cars, right? But we specialize, and I do data analysis, you run a podcast, and because we can specialize in the individual things we're best at, we can produce a lot more. And then when you extend it around the world, and even then it's this comparative advantage. So if I'm really good at building cars and I'm still pretty good at podcasting, but it's better for the world if somebody else who's maybe a little worse than I am at podcasting, but does podcasts, because then I can work on producing cars and I produce so many more, right? Basic comparative advantage. We build a prosperous world, right? That's why we have corporations. It's so we can specialize and build economies of scale and stuff like that. And so I think any concerns about maybe we'll produce too many of these types and not have enough of this and how to manage it, it's you can't control every individual life and every individual aspect from the government. You have to allow for large, robust, and liquid markets, and so that through those emergent decisions, we can achieve as much prosperity as possible. Which doesn't mean you don't intervene, you don't guide, you don't invest in certain things, but I think the delusion that we can micromanage everybody's life and perfectly create the economy we desire is not realistic or desirable.
So do you guys agree that it's okay to have these kind of trading relationships with, I guess, to Erik's point, the global south, which you were talking about wanting to eventually decouple from, but my concern goes back to China, not even because they're big, but because they have a leader whose propaganda involves talking about how they're fighting this war of ideas, as well as possibly a physical war in the future, according to the propaganda, against the West, against the United States, and how they're also funding Russia in terms of going into Ukraine and all that. Like, I do not want China, out of all the countries that would do these kind of factory, sweatshop type of jobs, I would not want China to be the one that would ultimately benefit from them because they have a very particular ideology of how they see themselves in the world, and I don't think we should allow them to gain as much power. But then the question is, how do we do that without, being like Samson that destroys the entire temple? How do we do that so that we remain in one piece? And do you guys, back to the tariffs here, do you guys think that Trump is trying to do this with China? But then how would that explain the whole TikTok thing? Like, is he trying to both try to be friendly to some of the TikTok people and get money that way while, surreptitiously trying to undermine China? Or I don't know, Eric, what do you think is going on here?
I think it's just
yes.
We got
Yes.
Nikkei 225 futures, so basically the futures market for the Nikkei in Japan suspended trading 30 minutes ago because they hit the circuit breaker.
No shit, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have done so. Here, I think so. I'll answer your question, and then I want to get to that Japanese part. And I love Japan deeply. And then what that indicates for the world is a big deal. But yeah, I don't think that. I think there's some short-term thinking with the TikTok thing, which is that it's just politically unpopular to ban TikTok, and then Trump, the pro and the con of Trump compared to, like, let's say Mitt Romney. I've met both Trump and Mitt Romney. Have had conversations with both. I've had tea at Mar-a-Lago with just him and like 2 other people in the tea room, and then and everything. So that's cool. I brought my mom to that, by the way, so maybe it's less cool.
What did you guys talk about?
No, your mom's cool.
It was right after January 6th, actually, right after he left office. So I always message people when they're at their worst, and then I get cool things from that. So I just emailed saying, "Can I meet Trump?" And then they're like, "Sure." So, and I was like, "Can I bring my mom?" Because my mom's 70, going on 71, and she's a big Trump fan. So, anyways, and then if you go on my Instagram, it was Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan were at this event. I was speaking at this event. Paul Ryan was speaking. Anyways, I think it's short term. The pro and the con of Trump is that he cares what's really popular. And then sometimes he's willing to, like on tariffs, willing to go against what's popular. But I think Trump does care about what's popular more than Mitt Romney does, which is why Trump won and Mitt Romney didn't, and everything. And that's just outside of changing demographics. Trump won in a worse demographic environment than Mitt Romney did, and everything. So I think Trump just knows TikTok is a big red button issue with young people, and if he were to ban it, he would get the blame. And if he didn't campaign for it, I think that's where it comes from. And then 2, on the Japan thing, again, this is where I wouldn't have, I want Japan tariffing China, and you're going to take an economic hit for that. Like, even much more so than the current West is tariffing China. We've already Obama tariffed China, Trump tariffed China, Biden kept those tariffs on China. I don't know if he increased them. I have to New York Times fact check myself.
He did increase.
He did, yeah, I believe he did. Yeah, okay, cool. I didn't want to give him credit when I wasn't sure. So I'll give Trump credit when I'm not sure. I'm not giving Biden credit when I'm not sure. Kidding, but kind of not. And so anyways, but this is the problem is I wouldn't have done these tariffs. I would have asked nicely, and then to have a more fair trade agreements with these people. And you wouldn't have gotten as much from those people by asking nicely, because often asking nicely in politics hardly ever works. But maybe it would work 10%, maybe it'd work a little bit. And my main thing that I would be strict on, which is you need to increase your tariffs in China. What are you doing to decouple from China? Not decoupling immediately, but because you'll destroy everyone. That's mutually assured destruction. I think I'd rather have cities nuked, one city on each side nuke than do that immediate decoupling from China, just because it would result probably in less suffering. Unfortunately, that's a bet. If I ever get clipped from that, I'll be fucked. But anyways, that's it, because you see these problems with Japan, who already has a struggling economy, which is our biggest regional partner in that area. So I hate to say that, and that's going to blow back on the U.S. So it's not even like, oh, poor Japan. That's just a huge indicator. That's what I'm gonna be spending my time thinking about and researching after this is done.
Quick question about Japan. Isn't it not the case that they're going to be doing a deal with China along with Korea now? I mean, the three hate each other. I don't know if Japanese people hate Korean people more or hate Chinese people more. I don't know, like, who hates who more.
I mean, they literally like exploded Chinese and Koreans' eyes out of their eye sockets with like air decompression, that one unit, human testing thing. I mean, they literally didn't see them as human.
Yeah, so I don't really see there being some kind of a long-term friendship here. But in the short term, though, if they are allying with these, the response to these tariffs, that's not a great sign for the United States, right? Like,
100% agree.
Wouldn't that talk about there being a certain level of incompetence within the administration so as to allow things like that? And the question that I have, let's say Joshua, because I know Trump's strongest soldier, I understand. But the question is, how long of a trust the plan mode is okay to be in until you would say, you know what, I gave these people a fair shot, I consider myself a patriot, but they do not have competent people that are running this because it's already been this amount of time and they're not really changing gears in such a way to actually improve the situation?
I will be with Trump until his very last day in office, and then I'm ready to burn it down.
You're going to be in the White House as everything is like burning to crisp, and you're just like with Trump. You're just like holding Trump, and you're going to be protecting him until until the Praetorian Guards arrive.
No, I mean, honestly, like I just have a lot of faith in Trump, and I have hope for the future beyond him. I really like what I've seen from Vance over the last however many months, and basically since he got the nom, like I've just really liked what I see from him. And so for me, I'm thinking of 12 years and then who knows what. And so for me, it's just kind of like this very long, slow march to quite literally like save our country. And so, yeah, I mean, there could be all kinds of things that come up that could go wrong or might give me pause. But the biggest thing about it is it's like, what is the alternative for those of us on the right who want things to be so different, right? Like, this is why,
there's none. That's the problem.
Yeah, right. That's the whole thing, and that's why myself and so many of my friends and my Twitter mutuals, it's like we have so much issue with a lot of you either never Trumpers or a lot of the people who, at least paid Trump the lip service, but now since he's been in office, doing a lot of counter signaling. It's like, who else do you think is going to give us anything near this? Like, where else is there to go? And until this massive cultural shift, which has happened, right, even from the youth, which Trump made massive strides on, and we start to quite literally build different types of people over the years and a new cultural element. I just don't see what the alternative is. And so that's more than anything is what gives me so much faith and confidence is that, what else are we going to latch onto? I
can answer this question.
Okay.
What else can we latch onto? Unfortunately, I think I'm in agreement with you and Erik that there are no people who we know in the popular culture today. I would compare this to Idiocracy, where back then, in Idiocracy, for those who don't know, it was a movie, came out, I think, in 2006, directed by Mike Judge, that talked about what the future would look like if only stupid people were having kids and all the smart people, because they didn't have time to have kids, stopped having kids. And you had piles of garbage laying everywhere in the street, and water was replaced with Gatorade, because it's got electrolytes in it. And anyway, the point is that the people who were in charge back then were, like, there was a pro wrestler who was president of the United States. And again, you could say, oh, like I'm kind of like doing some anti-Trump, jab at, Hulk Hogan going on the stage and talking about how he loves Trump. But if we are to consider what we're comparing, what we see right now to, we shouldn't compare it to like Bernie Sanders or Ocasio-Cortez. We should compare it to Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Paine. We should be comparing it to historical figures who we know were men of letters and extremely competent and extremely brilliant. So 100% there are people who we can compare to and say, yeah, actually things would be better if we had those people in charge, if we had people in charge who were philosopher kings. If we had those people in charge, things would be better. But the problem is that right now, I don't even think it's that they don't exist. I think that the culture, the idiocracy culture that and I think everybody's existing in it to a certain extent. I think it's just the nature of, bad educational standards and being on social media and following the algorithm. So not to say that individuals within that culture are not brilliant. I think everybody here on the panel is brilliant, but the overall culture that we're all mired in does feel very lowbrow. And it's going to be very hard for people to rise up the ranks of the algorithm who are not going to do certain things so as to appeal to that kind of culture. I don't know, Erik, what do you think?
Yeah, but that's you have to, if you're on the right, if I'm understanding what your point is correctly, if you're on the right, you need to kind of learn how to match the emotions of where the voters are at. You got to meet the voters where they're at in any democracy, hopefully, right? If it's not rigged, right? So, but the thing is like Mitch McConnell, who I think is one of the most unlikable people in the world. I don't like his bills, like 90% of them, but he did actually, like, he tweeted like what I just said, but in the most unpopular way to say it, right? He said, why, I don't know. I can't even re-explain like how he said it unpopular, because I'll make it sound just a little better and it won't even capture how dumb it was the way he phrased it, because he's just so uncharismatic. His staffers are so uncharismatic. But the larger point of what he said was, why are we focusing on tariffs on Europe and the West? We should be focusing on China. But it's always done we need to be promoting transgender rights in China. He didn't say that, but it's like, that's what all foreign policy conversations is they're lying to you about how this benefits the US. And they say, no, we're just trying to help the people. And normal Americans go, I don't care about transgender rights in China. I don't care about, my democracy in these other places. What's in it for me? I'm poor. My daughter just got raped. I don't care. My plant just closed down. I don't care. How does this help me? And none of them will be honest with it. Not John Bolton, not Mitch McConnell, not Nikki Haley. They have no honesty. And then also the way they would do it is not even in a way that would be even helpful to the average American. So like, I believe in Rome, if you go, take Afghanistan, those soldiers should be getting some land there. I think they should be getting, like how Alaska has shared oil profits. We should have been doing that in Afghanistan. How does this help not just American, quote unquote, national champions like big oil companies or whatever? It should help the average person. So these people just explain these things in the most unpopular, not self-serving way, because, maybe they get criticized in the UN. Maybe they get some leftist protest against them. I think that there should be honesty in our foreign policy that actually, I like Europe. And I don't want to crash their economy. I think I have more in common with French people, and even like French Vietnamese people. Like, I'm not talking just like, what I was about to say, these types of groups of people. I'm talking like I have way more in common with European culture and all the races that have European culture than I do with CCP people, than the CCP leadership people. I have way more in common. I don't want to crash those economies. I want to partner with those people, and I want to crush any global competition, in China or even with Russia. I don't want competition. I don't believe, Marco Rubio said, oh, we're in a multipolar world order now. Probably true. I want it unipolar. I only want America doing this. So anyway, so I forgot the original point here, but I just started ranting.
You were close to answering it in the rant, but I do want to zero in on what I think is a very important issue, because I think that there are a lot of smart people on different sides of the political spectrum. I don't think they're being represented that much in terms of the leaders because of this back and forth social media relationship where we're going to have people who, maybe they're competent in in a particular way, but they don't see the picture as fully, and I should say like as philosophically as the founding fathers did. And I'm not saying that we're going to resurrect the zombies of the founding fathers, but the mechanism I don't think is there right now, unless you get somebody here, like to answer your question about appealing to the people, unless you get somebody who is such a good liar that they could figure out a way to fake sounding, homely, for lack of a worse term here, and be folksy while in the background doing like 5D chess in their mind. And maybe the idea is that Trump is that guy, but I don't know.
He's not. To answer in on your zeroed in question quickly, Mitch McConnell. This is a tip to people that actually are like really smart on trade policy. Say January 6th was good, or say it was a rigged election, and then maybe people will listen to you. That these people don't have the guts to say it. 2020 was a rigged election, and these tariffs are kind of not as strategic as they should be. And let's focus on China. The problem is that all these people are the people that hate you. Mitch McConnell hates you, and all these people that disagree with want to disagree. They oftentimes hate you, and that's the problem. And they don't believe,
but they're not smart. Then that's the thing. They may specialize,
but you don't have to lie. Is my point. I believe that 2020 was rigged, and 2024 was proof of it. I believe that was just a blatantly rigged election, and at the same time, I disagree with Trump on these tariffs, and I want to destroy China, or the CCP is a better way to, actually legitimate way to put it, but they're not smart. And you don't have to lie. I believe both, and a smart person would believe both.
It's possible, but maybe there are certain things where you should put on a bit of a folksy charm to kind of like Bill Clinton did. You could say like Bill Clinton, but again, with Bill Clinton, he was smart, but definitely not at the level of the founding fathers type smart. So I don't know.
He took an IQ test. He's the smartest president by IQ level of presidents that have taken IQ tests.
Okay,
I think Bill Clinton's a genius. Unfortunately.
Okay, so it's close. Well, you say unfortunately, meaning then he was smart but not wise, because wouldn't a wise person make the kind of decisions for our country that would benefit it, as opposed to making?
Well, I think he actually did benefit the country in a decent amount of ways, but I don't want any Democrats to win. I want that party banned. In the same way that the Nazi party's banned in Germany, I want the Democrats banned. I want them,
tell me what Clinton did that you really like, and also just don't, whatever you're moving there, it's creating sounds in the microphone.
Oh, sorry, I'm twisting. I'm like fidget spinning my AirPods here.
I mean, you are a Zoomer, right? How old are you?
I am a Zoomer. I'm 26. Yeah, I'm on the edge of Zoomer. So
there we go. There we go.
Man. But yeah, I mean, Bill Clinton, I thought, made a lot of great deals with Newt Gingrich. I think, right to work wasn't that under Bill Clinton. I believe that there was a lot of good things that he did, that, he balanced the budget. I thought that was pretty incredible. I feel like I wish I were around in the 90s, because I feel like his push to, we were pretty close, from my read of it, to ending the welfare state in the 90s. And I felt like if there was a little bit more of a push, that would have solved so many immigration problems. That would have solved our debt problem. That would have solved inflation, if we just didn't really have that. So even though, that does help some legitimate people. And it's just ultimately, I feel like these, as the term used in the 90s, or 80s, actually, welfare queens kind of sucking on, welfare kings and queens sucking on the system. But yeah, I actually, I would have taken Bill Clinton over Bob Dole, for sure. And I think Bill Clinton he was a visionary, and again, in a way that I don't like, in some ways, but I think, and I really like, if you look at some of the original photos of when he was first elected, they were so cool. He just had a lot of young people there. There were people with, I really like this one photo. It's like Bill Clinton laying on Hillary's lap, like a young, hot Hillary, if that can be imagined. Because she was not a snack. She was the whole bakery. Actually, she was the whole fucking bakery. I was like, anyways.
And there's that famous scene of Bill Clinton playing the saxophone on the talk show. What was that talk show?
Arsenio Hall. If it starts with S and ends with X, Bill Clinton's good at it.
There we go.
Right?
No, but people on the right attribute Clinton to being like this illusory time of, deflecting a lot of these problems that we're experiencing right now and creating certain problems later on. Like, how much would you say he did bad? Like, what are the bad things that he did? And I definitely want to go to Armand and Joshua after this. But since you said the good, what is the bad?
Yeah, I don't think NAFTA was perfect. He did some, initial bombings that were bad. Not the Serbian bombings, but some other ones that I wasn't a big fan of. That I think he would even say he wasn't a big fan of. I think his administration really fucked over Haiti in the 90s. NAFTA was not imperfect, I would say. But there was, I think, yeah, he didn't eliminate the welfare state, but I don't know if a Republican could have gotten away with that either. And his first 2 years, he was very like left wing, Great Society. So, which I would be if I were like a Democrat, right? Like I would have really pushed for the really big bills, like what he did with healthcare in those first 2 years. And then you kind of learn the hard way in midterms that's too much. And then you do these more moderate bills. What I liked about Bill Clinton, switch to it, is he enjoyed governing. And I think like you could see Trump and Obama didn't really enjoy working with Congress. They didn't enjoy making those compromises that suck, but get stuff done. And I want people to just pass bills through Congress again, even though Congress is a massive, terrible place. But that's what I liked about Bill Clinton. So what I disliked about Bill Clinton, a lot of NAFTA, some of his initial bombing work, and his first 2 years as president, where he really pursued big left-wing bills. And then also he did some stuff which I think led to the 2008 financial crisis, which was, giving out too many loans, making it easier for people that ordinarily couldn't qualify for a housing loan to get it. And I understand the spirit of it was really good, but it ultimately gave a lot of loans to, at least I feel, and George W. Bush continued a lot of this, to people that couldn't pay their mortgages. And I think that's kind of what led people go Glass-Steagall. Yeah. And there's a truth to that. I do think it was giving loans to people who wouldn't ordinarily qualify for it, first-time homeowner loans. Anyways.
Armand, make sure when you're typing to mute. No problem. But before we get back to Armand, Joshua, would you give the devil his due when it comes to Bill Clinton, what Erik was talking about here, number one, and number two, would you see something positive about having somebody like a Bill Clinton figure, somebody who studied under, Carol Quigley, who has a lot of stuff going on upstairs when it comes to certain philosophical ideas, as opposed to being somebody, I'm not saying this is everybody on the right, but there is this element I'm seeing of just being purely reactive, just hooked into the algorithm, where what ends up driving the motivation behind maybe a post, maybe a viewpoint, is how the crowd, how all the subscribers react to it. To me, I think that's really poisonous for anybody, to be in that situation of depending on the audience, as opposed to having a more like higher minded view of the situation, and maybe then pretending to be not as highbrow as they actually are in order to appeal to the masses. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I really want to get to that point about the personality of the president, but a quick question for Erik. I'm surprised, with all your animosity towards China, you didn't bring up, Clinton bringing them into the World Trade Organization.
Completely fair point. Good. Just forgot. My bad. No, and a lot of people in the 90s, that was one of the biggest problems, was allowing and opening up with China. And Paul Ryan, as a House member, he voted for even more of that. So that's the problem with a lot of these free trade cucks, is that they really fucked us on that. You're absolutely right. Full credit to you. Thank you. I totally forgot.
Yeah, because in my head, I just kind of think of Clinton as creating China as we know it today.
Yeah, totally fair. You're absolutely right.
All right, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, but Lev, no, I mean, the one of the things that I feel like is often said in my corner of Twitter is that no one could have done this at this time other than Trump. There's not a single other personality type. It's like you can't just take Thomas Jefferson or George Washington and bring them to today and be like they would have done what was needed to be done, right? They lived in a very different time with very different culture and demographics and entirely world scenario. And you need like, there's some meme that's hilarious that it's like, Trump is like, Anglo in this way and Jewish in this way and Italian in this way and black in this way. And it's like he kind of combines all these weird elements into like one persona that allows him to be the only figure that we have right now. And so, yeah, like, do I want like you said, like men of letters to be the people at the top of our society? And it's like, if that's what the society needs at the time, then yes, right? Like if you're in war, if you're actually you need like a general, right? But if you're not in war and you're in peacetime and you're dealing with economic issues, you need a businessman, right? And perhaps one with a personality that can counter this insane cultural element that we're in, where he can say, I don't care what you are saying about me. I will not back down at all. I will never admit, defeat. I'll never accept it. But that's one of the reasons why I am fairly high on Vance is, he's an Ivy League grad and he's very well spoken, but he also knows how to handle himself very well from any attacks. He's very well composed. But where the future lies ahead is I've honestly, it's like I've seen so many great posters who like are, quoting philosophers and know all these different intricacies of history and political dynamics and religion, and then can also reach like your average voter. Like they're going viral, not because of a bunch of people of letters and high IQ are liking their content, because there's not enough people to sustain that type of traction online and get engagement. But they know how to get to the average person, and so like I always think of someone like a Martin who broke the kind of the Haiti thing. And it's like, he was just getting to the fact of the matter of these people in the forgotten towns of America and telling their story. And that resonated with so many people, right?
Wait, for those who don't know, tell us who that is.
Martin is a prolific Anon poster who, for as long as I've known him, was posting a lot more esoteric literature and doing translations and
Wait, what's his handle?
Well, he you might know him as Captive Dreamer.
Oh, Captive Dreamer.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting because what you're talking about with Haiti, I understand that, but it also goes back to this question of...
We're at 6.
Oh.
I do need to run soon.
Oh, okay, Armand, before you run, let's...
I also got to run too. Go to Armand.
Okay, I'm going to go to Armand right now, but, okay, before I go to Armand, I do want to make this quick point to what Joshua was saying. I don't know how much of it is what America needs as opposed to what America wants. Because you could say Trump is an egregore of a lot of these different wishes that the Americans have. The only question is whether certain things are done blindly, like we were talking about what led to China being a potentially suitable partner for Korea and Japan. We could objectively say that, hey, this isn't good. It could have been done in a better way. Maybe you could say, no, it couldn't. This is the best way it could have possibly been done in. We could have that conversation too. But if we imagine for a second that that is the case, then we could say that there are certain things that could be worked on there. And to the point about the online influencers who are more philosophically minded, yes, but I also find that in the right-wing sphere of intellectuals, I see a lot of recurring themes. I see talking about Spengler's Decline of the West, for instance. I see a lot of books over and over again. And the only concern here is that, yes, they may specialize a lot in very specific things and they may read a lot there, but I'm not sure if that means that they have a broader perspective if everything that they read is still located within a certain mindset. That's just my personal gripe, which we could talk about later on. But anyway, Armand, well, let me know your thoughts.
Can you restate? I couldn't understand the question.
I'm not going to restate, but what I am going to say is when it comes to the level of education, not in terms of going to school, but in terms of somebody who is like wise enough to lead the country, not somebody who is just reacting to whatever's going on in the algorithm. I'm not seeing this being a quality in a lot of the people who are in charge right now. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm curious what your take on this is, as far as having some kind of a, not philosopher king, because America doesn't have kings, but having some kind of a group of leaders that would be smart enough to do the right things for the country, but at the same time know how to politically maneuver themselves in this new paradigm we're in. Like, is there any hope for that, or are we totally lost to the algorithm now?
I think the challenge of our times is exactly that, is that there are politicians or leaders, for example, who do work, like Mitch McConnell's statement on tariffs that Erik referred earlier is like, I think a good point of it. It was like, it's this bland, long written thing and so on. But he's like objectively correct versus like what Trump is doing. And so you need people who are able to adapt to sort of the algorithmic immediate attention. You know, I made a joke. I wanted to make a joke earlier about like, well, we need like Subway Surfers playing down here or something, so Gen Z will pay attention. But I think it's difficult. We are in a new era that is like uniquely like our attention spans are shot. I do think actually our kids will be raised with less smartphones and exposure because we're the first generation sort of like it happened to kids. The technology is new, but now people recognize the harms. I think it'll be like cigarettes. But for this era, you need a combination. And sure, I don't know if we see anybody who does it. I've seen like people, I think, at lower levels of government, like in various state governments or city, who have an ability to like people's attention online, but also are deep and thoughtful. And but it's the marriage of the two is rare. And I think it's something that society will need to find.
Well, Armand, I mean, this is it. This is what BTR is. And yes, this sounds boastful as hell, but I think it's well deserving of it. Because what this whole project has been from its start is to combine all these different circles together, because that way, like to the point you were talking about, Joshua, there are a lot of very intelligent people who are within the right sphere who are very well read. What I want to do is I want to make sure that they don't have any gaps in their knowledge when it comes to things that they just may not have gotten around to, you know, because you only have a limited amount of time in your day, and there could be certain things that you miss. So this is the mission, to grow a new crop of elites. Whether there's somebody right now that exists that would qualify, I'm not sure. But the idea behind what we're doing here is to bring more of those people into the spotlight. And maybe they'll get inspired by some of these conversations to pursue office or to pursue some kind of NGOs that can start growing more people of this sort. Because again, I'm not that confident in just saying what the people want, because, you know, people want a lot of things that may be nice in the short term, but in the long term will suck donkey balls. So Erik, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, no, Joshua, go for it.
Real quick, Armand, do you have to go? I know. So the beauty of Lev is these podcasts is that great discussion with everyone, but I've been at times where like I need to go. So,
yes, Erik, you gotta go. Some final thoughts.
I got to go. Well, I just want to say something nice about Armand is the people that are becoming, and Joshua too, the people that are becoming the next presidents of the United States are running like at NIMBYism and everything, which he runs. These are the people that are running the country. I remember seeing this like TikTok edit, and someone comments, the next president is not doing political TikTok edits, you know, for a niche group. And I replied, I said, they absolutely are. Yeah. That's absolutely the next Gen Z president. And one of my friends, and again, I know you got to go, he did a lot of the social media stuff for John Fetterman's campaign, did that with other people, but he was one of the people, and we're both Gen Z people. And then we said, when Gen Z becomes eligible, I don't know how old you are, when Gen Z or younger millennials are run for president, it will make Obama and Trump look like nothing. And it'll be just at a whole new level, I think, of aesthetics. Like I see in your cover photo, you have this great FDR retro vibe, and it's great. Yeah. And I need to stalk you, Joshua. I haven't done it yet while on this call and everything. So these are the people, and Joshua and here and Lev, we are the, not me actually, just you three are the next political. I've fucked myself too much to ever run for anything, but you three are the people that are in line to be the next world leaders and political elites of this world. So thank you so much. I got to go. Armand, I know you got to go. Joshua, Lev, love you. I'll follow you and stalk you after.
Where can people find you? Erik, where can people find you?
At Erik Finman, ErikFinman. Thank Thank you
There
so
we go.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Armand. Where can people find you?
At Armand Doma.
At Armand Doma. Armand, thank you very much for being here,
you.
brother. And before we go, just a couple, we have two super chats over here. One from Dunk, the short-legged Mac Daddy Achino. Lev, who are you supporting for NYC mayor? I don't know. I haven't seen who the candidates are, so I have to take a look. And then last one over here, send Lev some cash, you roaches, from Solitude731. Thank you so much, Solitude731. This has been a wonderful discussion. I really appreciate it. Armand, thank you so much. Joshua, and Armand, where could people find you? Did I already ask
On
you this?
Twitter, on Twitter at Armand Doma.
There we go. On Twitter, Armand Doma. Everybody follow Armand. Please do that. And Joshua, where can people find you? And any final thoughts? Because I haven't asked you for any final thoughts. So go for it.
Well, quickly, you can find me at Josh Rainer, Rainer Gold, on all social medias. But I kept coming back to the in my head the education thing that Erik had sort of brought up, because I think that's going to be the biggest shift, and it's going to be how not necessarily stratified, but how people are self-educating. There's the internet in many ways that, the internet was there when we were younger, but the amount of things that I'm exposed to now, and if, I just keep thinking if I had known about those things or had the ability to explore those interests when I was younger, it would have changed the entire course of my life. And so I think we're going to see, if we can, public schools kind of shifting a thing where you can identify people of different skill sets, and, the exact opposite of No Child Left Behind. You're going to have children in every different stratification as possible, because you're starting to identify skill sets younger. And, there's the base level of education required, but there's also kind of starting to identify people who, okay, this person's clearly a genius, so let's put them here. And this person has a knack for, working with their hands or something, or some kind of more innovative or invention type stuff. And you start identifying people. And then you also have so many different types of schooling. You'll have the public schools, you have different kinds of private schools as people are, and then more homeschooling, and you'll have all these different kinds of programs. And so we can't even wrap our heads really around the type of person that's going to be created for like whatever generation are toddlers and elementary school kids now, right? Like that's going to be a major shift. And that's going to be a really big thing that I think is able to highlight individuals and what their strengths are. And so we can develop people to closer to what their actual highest potential is. And so we can get really impressive people again. Yeah.
Well, speaking of strength, I would be remiss if I did not mention how important it is, the kind of work you're doing as far as telling people how to get in better shape, how to take care of their body, because the body is incredibly important as well as the mind is. And when you combine those two things, I mean, again, we could look at all the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans, like all the people that the founding fathers themselves looked up to, how much of a strong element health was in their life. Like you had to have like this warrior physique and all that stuff, right? Like that is important. Do you imagine there being these future, trad right-wing gymnasiums that are going to have like, super high ceilings, for the mind to think better, and all kinds of obstacle courses and things of that nature being much more in the mainstream as opposed to just in the minds of maybe some of the people that are writing this stuff down in X right now?
Yeah, I mean, you just can't ignore the physical, biological component to the mind and the spirit and whatever kind of person you're creating. And so we need healthy people to be the people who are able to ascend, right? Like you can't have people with poor diets and poor lifestyles and not being physically healthy to actually get to their, if you're trying to create a really good musician, they can't be like physically all fucked up. It's just like, that's just not like going to help. But it's like for the same thing as a scientist, like, I mean, you're perhaps able to be like, a Stephen Hawking or something, but like, he didn't develop his whole life that way. He became that way at a later time. And
it wasn't a question of willpower, in other words, right?
Yeah. So, what you're talking about is if you want people to, if we want a great country, we need great people. And in order for people to be great, they need to, and this is always this is why I just love the Ray Peat stuff, is people get all, weirded out by like what people who are inspired by him are doing with their diets and stuff. But the whole idea that, oh, there you go.
This is Boss Coffee, and I've been getting back into sugar here. This has how much sugar? 19 grams of sugar in this thing, but it is a really, really delicious canned coffee. And you are pro sugar, right? It's
I mean, what I've been drinking is literally a cup of hot sugar water. I call it sugar tea. When I don't if I don't have tea, I mean, I just I like hot water, and I like sugar. And what I've found is, that what literally gives me energy is eating this way. And when I have energy, all of a sudden I'm just a much better person. My mind is better. I'm more productive. Like, I feel better. I'm more active. And so, I'm just always have really valued the primacy of the body. But, the best I've been very fortunate that I have found places and people and communities where what you spend your time doing is you have a group of people who work out really hard, and people are not just impressive physically, but they're willing to put in the effort and the dedication. And then in those dynamics is when I've had some of the most enlightening and intelligent conversations I've ever had. So the idea of, the warrior philosopher hybrid, where you train your body, and sort of in the aftermath with your, fellow compatriots, you have these amazing conversations, which you're basically teaching each other, right? Like, one person read this and the other person read that, and this person has this opinion. I'm gonna make a comment on that comment I just about the
Black Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So, and this is where, this opinion can go counter to a lot of the conventional wisdom is, there's this couching that carbs are only good if you use them. And what I have, first off, I just believe that carbs are really vital for the functioning of the metabolism in the first place. But there's this idea with, this, you kind of have to earn your carbs. This is something that I heard all my life in the fitness world and as an athlete. But it's actually it's sort of flipped. If you eat in a way that gives your body a functioning metabolism, which is able to produce energy, you will be driven to be active. And so I have found myself that the more carbs and sugar that I consume, the more my body instinctually wants to go move around. And I say, I have a bunch of energy. I want to go work out now, versus going, I have to do my workout first, and then afterwards I can have my little treat, kind of a thing like that. So I'm actually probably in the next few days going to do a big sugar video because I think it's so misunderstood. And just from my own personal experience with quite literally sugar maxing, not even being remotely apprehensive about how much sugar I consume.
So the fat does not accumulate.
Yeah, no, it's wild. My weight either stays stable or goes down, basically living off of predominantly sugar. And not just that, but I just feel amazing. It's kind of mind blowing because, you're told how bad it is for you, but I literally carry sugar packets around in my fanny pack when I go out into the world. I put sugar in my water. I consume lots of fruit. I put sugar on my fruit. And it's I would not have believed it if I hadn't experienced it myself. And so I think that's going to be a major change this is the thing that people say, we're going to see a greater bifurcation physically. The people who have it figured out, potentially people that have the good genetics in the first place, people who get lucky and get put in the right, scenario, you're going to see the lower rungs perhaps deteriorate further as we're in this kind of weird technologically advanced world where you can, you're compiling generations and generations of poor health and poor food choices now that we've had the processed food industry for so long. And then you're going to have the people who from very young age are feeding their children all these amazing foods. You're kind of going to potentially see this splitting of the species into this superior form, and then quite literally the dregs of society.
That's going to be a very hairy situation if we
Yeah.
consider how many people are going to be the latter as opposed to the former. But one last question, because I'm really, really curious about all these things, and we should definitely do a health-related stream later on. But when it comes to calories in, calories out, you may get this question all the time, but would that be still like the standard wisdom when it comes to people losing weight ultimately? Like the amount, like the sheer amount of calories that you take, regardless of any kind of, additions or subtractions of what you could do better or worse, would that be the way to go as far as losing weight?
The way I always sort of answer that question is that, of course, calories matter, but it doesn't mean you have to consider them. The goal is you want to achieve the result. And some people say that the only mechanism that you can lose weight is if your calories out exceed your calories in. And so they go to the place where I'm going to meticulously make sure that my calorie intake is less than my calorie output. Of course, it's fairly hard to measure your calorie intake. It's extremely hard to measure your calorie output. But what myself and so many people have found is that if you make certain choices, then the results happen on their own without you having to worry about that. So I've experienced, the extremes of just about every diet you can imagine. And a lot of people report that if they just eat something that resembles a carnivore diet, they can have all the fatty steaks that they want. And however you want to construct the math equation, at some point they lose weight and they feel better and look better. So does that mean that they're not burning more than they take in? I'm not saying that at all. It just means that they don't have to worry about that. That it seems that the metabolism gets stimulated. And this is something that I posted about recently where there's this, I guess I'd call her a researcher, nutrition expert, Denise Minger, sort of people in paleo circles especially, but it's been pretty established and gotten popular with keto, that once you exceed a certain amount of fat intake and reduce your carbs, your body goes into a state of ketosis. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, fat loss just kind of becomes much easier. And what she also identified is that there's something on the other side, which doesn't have a name, but what she, kind of jokingly called carbosis, which is if you eat a certain percentage of your calories from carbs, which, is like above 80%, then you also have this sort of magic metabolic process. And so what myself and many others have doing who have either been inspired by Ray Peat or maybe not even know anything about him is you're seeing this popularity where people are sort of kind of doing both within perhaps the same day. So you spend your entire day, your morning and your afternoon eating like a low fat, high carb vegan. And then at night you eat like a keto carnivore type. And separating your foods like this allow you to enjoy a wide spectrum of foods and allow you to tap into both of these metabolic processes, which potentially might be drastically more healthier and easier on the body and more enjoyable than doing a meticulously weighed and measured. Look, I've done it all. Like I have counted every single calorie I've eaten I did it for close to 10 years, and of course, like I didn't actually weigh every last grain of rice every single day, but I did it so much and I would log the stuff even that I was eyeballing, and I had great results with that. But then, you sort of feel that, oh, there's still more to be had versus just manipulating your weight. And you can manipulate your weight easily and feel very good doing it, and perhaps not get the negative effects of driving the fat loss by lowering your calorie intake, which lowers your metabolism, which means all of your bodily functions slow down and you become less energetic, less vital, just kind of quite literally less good in every way that your body can be, because your metabolism is what's driving every single last process of the body.
And so for the people who want to engage in what you're talking about, who, maybe before they didn't eat breakfast, in the morning, and they thought, oh, I'm just going to intermittently fast all this time and then end up eating. For those people, if they feel like there is like some giant ball in their stomach after they consume all these carbs in the morning, and they feel like, oh, what happened to my morning energy? Now I'm like a balloon in the morning, and I wish that I could do more work, but now I'm just gonna lay here in this comatose state. Would you say that these are just superstitions that these people are telling themselves then when they actually get into this kind of way of life that you're talking about? Like their body's just going to, the engine's going to run so efficiently that in the morning they're not going to have to worry about these superstitious things.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very confident saying this. I've never had this type of energy in my entire life, and I'm always someone who struggled with sleeping and insomnia. And all of a sudden now, like I'm on like an 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. really consistent sleep schedule, and that is like unheard of for me. I going to bed before midnight was like impossible for me. And I wake up, my eyes open, I'm just ready to go. And that's just not what I understand at all.
And you eat breakfast first thing in the morning, you eat breakfast?
Yeah. So I'm very against fasting, at the very, very least on any consistent basis. And what I have found is basically as soon as I can, I wake up and I go to the kitchen and I quite literally make like a hot cup of sugar water. Now, you could alternatively just go and eat a piece of fruit. What I would recommend, I'm sort of in this like advanced experimentation phase. What I would just recommend for everyone to try is do not fast. Eat, as within reason. You don't have to like wake up and then have like a, bowl of berries next to your bed. But do not fast and spend your morning and afternoon like you're a fruitarian, and spend your dinner like you're a keto carnivore. Eat meat and vegetables. And that doesn't mean that in your carb period you can eat a donut. No, that's filled with fat. You're not eating any fat. You're eating easily digestible sugary carbs, and do it the healthy way. Do it the clean way. Eat fruit. Just eat fruit during the day, and eat meat and vegetables at night. Do that for a couple of weeks, and I would feel like people would be blown away by how they feel.
So you're not big on the fat. Well, what about like the eggs, for instance? With their fat.
No. I mean, look, I'm very pro eggs. I'm very pro red meat. I'm very pro dairy. I'm very pro animal fat sources. This is kind of a thing. One, especially for people who are trying to lose weight. People who are already maintaining a healthy weight pretty easily. They don't really need to, they're already fine. So they're usually not the ones looking for a lot of help. What I've found is both. This is a great way for people to lose weight, and it can completely change your energetic state. I just have so much energy. I always found, I was a kind of person who I'd often eat eggs for breakfast and, a very, very healthy diet. But when I used to compete in strongman, and when I was my strongest and my leanest, 10% body fat, shredded, PRing all my lifts, I instinctually felt, hey, if I have a big breakfast, it has to digest for hours, and then I don't feel like I can train, or like I feel a little sluggish. So what I did instinctually was I would have oatmeal and yogurt and berries for breakfast, and that would give me a nice bolus of carbs and energy, and it would digest fairly quickly. And then I would go to the gym and I would work out, and then I would go have some fruit, or I would drink juice during my workout, or I would, I lived in Venice Beach. I would go walk down to the Venice boardwalk and go get an acai bowl. And I would do all that. And then I would be very, very active throughout the day. I would work out multiple times, do whatever work needed to be done. And then at the end of the day, I'd have dinner, and I would usually eat like, meat and rice and stuff like that. And that is when I felt the best. And, this idea that like every single meal that you have should be like this, like quote unquote, perfectly rounded square meal, all resembling the same thing. No, like you basically are kind of eating for what is to come. And also, in the sense, what you just did. If you woke up, and a lot of carnivores I know do this, but like if you had a massive like ribeye steak first thing in the morning, would you want to like go run a marathon right afterwards? Probably not. But if you were going to have to run a marathon, you basically have some easily digestible carbs. And so the way I think about my day is I want to be go, 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 and have tons of energy and feel good. And then at night is like nourishment. It's like energy for the day and nourishment at night. I'm going to go to bed. And that has just worked so well for me.
Because people think of nighttime as being the fasting time, the time when the body should repair itself, not really digest food.
Well,
Would you-
what I would say is that like the protein heavy foods are what you are using to literally repair your tissue, right? Your body is using the proteins are building blocks and carbs are energy. And then fat is interesting because fat can be used for energy, but it's really kind of this like building block of a lot of your hormones and other tissues, right? And so fat is in this interesting kind of place where you don't need it all the time. Like you need carbs to give your body energy to use right away, and you need protein to build the body. And fat is something, if you eat all of the fat that you eat, or the majority of the fat that you eat in a week in like 1 or 2 days, as opposed to like spaced out every day, you don't really like notice it's not like you notice a difference. You don't feel like something's deficient if you don't eat a lot of fat for a couple days. But if you don't eat a lot of carbs for a couple days, like anyone who's ever tried keto will tell you, like within a couple days, all of a sudden you're just like, boom, I just like all my energy just came down a bunch. And then, that's that keto adaptation phase where your body then has to start learning how to produce ketones and then start, upregulating gluconeogenesis that's breaking down your own muscle tissue and body tissue from protein to create energy.
Yeah.
You really feel these different elements. Like if I eat a lot of carbs and I have all this energy to train and I train, but then I don't eat protein, I don't feel like I've recovered from my workout row, but I had a lot of energy for my workout. Alternatively, if I eat a bunch of protein and I don't eat a lot of carbs, I might be able to recover from my workout, but I wasn't able to do anything of substance in my workout because I didn't have the carbs for energy. And then on the other side, fat, if I don't eat fat for a couple days in any appreciable amounts, I don't notice anything. If I don't eat it in any appreciable amounts for weeks, all of a sudden I start to feel like, oh man, I just kind of feel weird. And you realize all of a sudden you're not getting the cholesterol necessary to make all of your steroid hormones. You're likely missing necessary fat soluble vitamins. And so whenever I've taken the fat really down in my diet, I've actually found that vitamin A and cholesterol are usually the two biggest things missing, as opposed to like, total grams of fat. Because your cholesterol and your vitamin A get used up when you have a really functioning metabolism to build your hormones. So you can eat a piece of liver and give yourself a massive boost of vitamin A, and there's not a lot of fat in liver. You can eat 2 pounds of shrimp and maybe get like, 1.5 grams of fat, but shrimp is really high in cholesterol. And so like what I'm trying to do, I don't believe in a one size fits all diet. What I try to do is give people, I've experimented with all these different things. These are tools. And so if most people want to lose weight and most people want to have more energy. So that advice covers a bigger percentage of the population than focusing on anything else. And it's what I'm myself most interested in. Like I used to be a really, really, basically I was a competitive athlete, and my whole life was centered around training. And then COVID happened, and then my career changed, and then I had a child, and it's like a whole different dynamic. And then I put on some weight. So it's like, I felt the energy sucked. I felt like I kind of lost my physical body of what it was before. And now I'm quite literally getting it back. And I'm blown away that I felt like I was ramming my head into a brick wall. Like, man, nothing's really working now. Like I can't seem to get that version of myself back. And it wasn't until I started eating like this specifically, where it's sugar all day long, fruit, juice, sugar, quite literally white sugar. And then at night, I have some combination of protein and vegetables and maybe some starch if I felt like I worked out really, really hard. And all of a sudden that just changed everything. And that's why it's just like I can't stop like trying to tell people, especially because carnivore is so popular because it's easy. It's so simple. Same thing with keto, though, there's a lot more food choices. And a lot of people go for the vegan for the same thing. I just don't eat meat. It's super, super easy. So I'm telling people to do is like be both of those things. You could be both those things on the same day. It could be both those things on separate days. It could be fruitarian one day and be carnivore the next day. I find the best is the kind of a combination of the two. I really think that not just being vegan, your body needs a lot of carbohydrates and sugar, and your metabolism kind of just goes to the next level. So I simplify it, just go, you're fruitarian all day until the sun goes down, and now you're a keto or carnivore. And it's just so simple. And just do that, and it blows people's minds. I've had so many people I've talked to, so many people online who are doing things similar say, I have so much energy and fat loss is effortless. And you don't have to weigh and measure things. You just go by your actual hunger cravings.
Now, if people want you to be their health coach, is that an option for people online? Are you currently in that position?
I haven't had any clients for a few years now. So it's not something I'm necessarily interested in, but if someone wanted to make me an offer, perhaps I couldn't refuse. I'd be willing to. But in the near future, I'll be putting out a lot more specific content on that. I'm going to do a big long form video, and then, perhaps I would release some, perhaps some diet guides or something like that. But
nice.
I post about this kind of stuff regularly on my Twitter, and I'm talking about it on my podcast. And so,
and what's the name of your podcast for all the people out there?
My podcast is called Rainer Radio, Rainer. A lot of people think it's Rainier. It's not. It's Rainer. Rainer Radio, and it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, every single podcast app. It's on Substack. I posted on YouTube. I posted on Rumble. I'm posting them on Twitter now. So yeah.
I have a link over here. Here's to the Spotify. You got the long hair over here. I think you cut it a little bit short now, but going for more of the Jesus look over here.
Yeah, I had that. I rocked that for like 10 years.
Nice.
And then a few years ago, I just had enough of it. I had a big beard, and I just shaved my whole head.
Yeah. So guys, watch Rainier, or listen rather to or both. Right? It's on YouTube as well.
Yeah, on YouTube, on some of the episodes, I have either not posted them or edited parts out because there was talk of the.
Well, we're on YouTube now, so
inject. Yeah. So
yes.
Rumble.
Inject your own idea of what that might be.
Yeah. We're trying to inject ideas and inject energy into people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Rumble and Spotify and Substack and everything else are totally unedited. It's just YouTube that some of the episodes are limited.
There we go. And once again, for the people who are listening to this in the X space, go click on the YouTube in the Jumbotron there. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button. Patreon.com/breaktherules. The Jason Trajani episode is on Patreon right now. It is still paywalled for the patrons, and it shall be paywalled. What is going to come out on YouTube next week is... Oh, yeah, Sunday, yes. Yeah, next week is going to be the edited Jason Trajani interview. It is probably the best interview that I have done with Jason Trajani ever. I'm not just saying it. It really is. We covered so many different things. We were talking about that pyramid. You remember they found under the pyramid? I don't know, Joshua, if you saw it. Those pillars, like 8 pillars that are going down the length of like the Empire State Building, if not larger, underneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. I mean, this totally rewrites everything as far as history goes.
Yeah, so, I saw like what I guess I thought was like some meme version of it, and I don't know what was real.
No, the meme version is crap. No, this, from what I'm understanding, this is legit. That is a structure underneath, and Jason, I'm not going to give too much away, but he thinks it may have something to do with Atlantis. So if you guys want to know more about that, patreon.com/breaktherules, become a patron today, and you are going to see that, and you are also going to, if you become a $20 plus patron, you are also going to be able to go to the New York City shows. We're going to have one with Steph Uberboyo at the end of this month. He's coming to New York City, so we're going to be arranging, picking the date, picking the time. But if you guys want to be there, you know Uberboyo, right, Joshua?
Him and I have been mutuals for some time now.
Yeah, there we go. And Joshua, by the way, whenever you're going to be in New York City, I would definitely love to host you there at the BTR NYC studios. And the patrons come in. We're going to go into the roof. I have a nice rooftop there with a good view of the New York City skyline. We're going to go to an after party afterwards, maybe at like a bar around there. So if you guys want to do that, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today. Watch that Giorgiani episode. And so... Where are you located without doxing? I don't know if you want to reveal where
I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay, there we go. So once you fly to New York, it will be an absolute pleasure to have you in the BTR studios, Joshua.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you.
So guys, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, like, subscribe, follow Joshua, follow all the great people here. This was a fantastic discussion. I'm very happy we got to talk a little bit about health as well towards the end. So that's it, guys. I will see you next week. Look out for the Giorgiani episode. That's coming out. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.